Chapter 476. Seeing this scene, Wei Yang Tian and the hunchbacked old man's expressions changed. However, as soon as the two of them attacked, countless cosmic rays appeared around them and enveloped them like a net. Below, the Moke clan and the never-ending Starfield experts stopped simultaneously. Mr. Bai and the Moke clan's patriarch, Mo Tianqi, took the lead and stood in front of the two black shadows. Boom! As two explosions rang out, the two black shadows were forced to a stop. However, many men in black suddenly appeared in the surroundings below. These men in black wielded longswords and rushed toward Yi Xian and Mo Xie. Seeing this scene, the war army and the others changed their expressions, especially the war army and Baldi, who rushed toward the men in black. On the other side, Zhua Qing, Earth Fiend, and the others blocked in front of Mo Xie. However, due to the intense battle just now, Zhua Qing, Zhang Jun, and the others were not in peak condition at all. Hence, the moment they clashed, Zhua Qing, Zhang Jun, and the others were immediately suppressed. In front of Yi Xian, Lian Wanli stood quietly with the azure dragon saber in her hand. All of a sudden, Lian Wanli slashed to the right with the long saber. Boom! The space cracked, and an afterimage retreated rapidly from the space. Lian Wanli glanced coldly at the afterimage. You want to kill him? Have you asked this king? As soon as she finished speaking, she was about to rush over with the saber. However, at this moment, she seemed to have thought of something and quickly stopped. Then, she returned to Yi Xian's side with the saber. In the distance, the black shadow suddenly disappeared. Lian Wanli raised the saber and slashed. Boom! An explosion resounded, and the black shadow was pushed back again. However, the next moment, more than a dozen experts in black appeared around Lian Wanli. Lian Wanli frowned slightly. Fight me one-on-one if you can. The dozen or so people ignored her and rushed towards her. Lian Wanli looked at Yi Xian. Take care of yourself. As soon as she finished speaking, she raised the saber and slashed forward. Boom! The black-robed man at the forefront was sent flying by Lian Wanli's slash. However, in the next moment, a long sword appeared at the back of her neck. Lian Wanli's reaction was extremely fast. She dodged to the side and directly dodged the sword. At the same time, she swept the azure dragon saber in her hand. Boom! The three black-clothed men were sent flying. But in the next moment, numerous black shadows surrounded Lian Wanli. At the same time, a man in black holding a sword suddenly appeared behind Yi Xian and stabbed the back of Yi Xian's neck. Fast, accurate and ruthless. As the sword stabbed into the ground, a smile appeared on the black-clothed man's face. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. However, in the next moment, his expression changed drastically. He was about to retreat when a flying sword slashed through his throat. The black-robed man glared at Yi Xian, his eyes filled with disbelief. At this moment, Yi Xian stood up slowly and turned to look at the man in black. Are you surprised? Are you surprised? The black-clothed man glared at Yi Xian. Even in death, he didn't understand why Yi Xian was fine. Yi Xian's palms suddenly opened. In the next moment, an aura sword flew out from his palm. Dozens of meters away, the head of a black-clothed man fighting with Lian Wanli suddenly flew off. Seeing this, the black-clothed men fighting Lian Wanli changed their expressions and quickly retreated. Lian Wanli looked at Yi Xian. Done? Yi Xian nodded. Done. As he spoke, he looked at the nearby Emperor Hound. At this moment, the Emperor Hound wasn't fighting the Black Qilin. The Black Qilin had already returned to Mo Xie's side. However, its eyes were still on the Emperor Hound and Yi Xian. Its eyes were still filled with hostility and viciousness. The Emperor Hound returned to Yi Xian. This evil Qilin's bloodline is very pure. It's orthodox. Yi Xian said, between it and you, whose bloodline is higher? The Emperor Hound fell silent for a moment before it said, it's about the same. Therefore, there's no bloodline suppression between us. As it spoke, it looked up into the sky. Kid, you seem to have a new enemy. A new enemy. Yi Xian looked up into the sky. At this moment, Wei Yang Tian and the hunchbacked elder from the Mok clan were still trapped. Yi Xian's expression instantly darkened when he saw Wei Yang Tian trapped. Things are getting serious. In the sky, the white-robed middle-aged man sized up Yi Xian and smiled. Monstrous indeed. With the speed of this flying sword, there probably aren't many people of the same rank who can resist it. As he spoke, he turned around. Didn't you want to see the geniuses of the never-ending star region? Come out. As soon as he finished speaking, the space nearby suddenly split open, and then a man and a woman walked out. The man wore a black robe, his long hair draped over his shoulders, and a sheathed saber hung from his waist. Meanwhile, the woman beside him wore a tight-fitting lotus leaf dress. Her lips were red, and her teeth were white. She was very beautiful. The man's gaze descended onto Yi Xian and Mo Xie. You choose. The woman beside him looked at Yi Xian. Him. As soon as she finished speaking, she floated down very slowly like a snowflake falling from the sky. Yi Xian frowned slightly when he saw this. The emperor hound beside him said, Do you want to fight? Yi Xian said softly, I won't. Can I? The emperor hound said, I don't think so. That woman is here for you. Yi Xian was just about to speak when Lian Wanli suddenly said, Ben. This chapter isn't over. Please continue to the next page. Your Majesty. Yi Xian looked at Lian Wanli. Lian Wanli blinked. Your Majesty loves to hit women. As soon as she finished speaking, she raised her saber and soared into the sky. The emperor hound looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian took out a pile of purple origin crystals and began absorbing them madly. Healing. He wanted to properly heal now because he realized that he was in a dangerous situation. Very dangerous. Especially when never-ending heaven was trapped. The situation was very serious. Yi Xian began healing while the emperor hound stood guard by his side. Under such circumstances, many people would definitely want Yi Xian to die. On the other side, Zhua Qing, who was beside Mo Xie, also charged towards the black-robed man. Be it Yi Xian or Mo Xie, both of them needed to recuperate at this moment, because their current combat power was undoubtedly very weak. In the sky, the white-robed middle-aged man glanced at Yi Xian and Mo Xie, and then he looked at Wei Yang Tian and the hunchbacked old man. Wei Yang Tian's face was expressionless. The rainbow ribbon around her was about to be destroyed by the cosmic rays. The hunchbacked old man was the same. His dark golden shield was already turning illusory. The white-robed middle-aged man turned to look at a god sorcerer. Hurry up. The god sorcerer nodded slightly. In the next moment, she started chanting silently. It didn't take long for the sky above the burial sky Great Wall to tremble violently. Right after that, the space above the burial sky Great Wall suddenly cracked open, and countless cosmic rays shot out from within. The expressions of everyone here changed at the sight of this. If the cosmic rays were allowed to descend, the entire burial sky Great Wall would instantly be reduced to ashes. Moreover, everyone here would die. Besides Wei Yang Tian and the others, who else could stop the cosmic rays? No one. Yi Xian had a solemn expression as well. Brother Emperor Hound, can you stop it? The Emperor Hound thought for a moment and said, I can escape. Yi Xian was speechless. The Emperor Hound gazed at Yi Xian. Are you going to flee? Yi Xian glanced at the war army and Baldi who were still fighting in the distance, and he fell silent. The Emperor Hound spoke solemnly, Big brother, we really can't beat them. Yi Xian spoke softly, do you think they'll let me go? The Emperor Hound fell silent. Because a part of the reason they'd appeared here was to look for Yi Xian. So, anyone could flee, but Yi Xian couldn't. No matter how he fled, they wouldn't let him go. Meanwhile, Yi Xian stood up and looked up into the sky. He spoke softly, move aside. I'm going to unleash my ultimate move. The Emperor Hound was speechless. P.S. Save as much as you can for the 15th, end of this chapter. Chapter 477. The Emperor Hound and Lien Wanli moved to the side. Yi Xian lifted his head to look at the sky. Looking at the endless cosmic rays, he knew there was no turning back this time. He had to fight to the death. Yi Xian was about to summon the pagoda when a woman suddenly appeared above Yi Xian. The woman wore green clothes and had a small cloth bag at her waist. Yi Xian was stunned when he saw this woman. She was the painter that he'd met when he'd first entered the heaven domain. Why is she here? Yi Xian's mind was filled with questions. In the air, Master Painter glanced at the horizon. A moment later, she took out a black inkstone from her small cloth bag. Then, the black inkstone rushed into the sky. In an instant, the entire horizon was covered in darkness. The darkness was like ink that covered the entire sky. At the same time, the black ink blocked all the cosmic rays. The great sovereign's gaze fell on the painter, and his eyes were solemn. The 6 divine wizards also looked at the painter. The painter looked up at Wei Yang Tian, who was trapped in the sky, and smiled, "I'm late." She was about to attack when the great sovereign suddenly appeared in front of her. The great sovereign looked at the painter. "I presume your excellency is that painter." The painter smiled, "That's me." The great sovereign smiled, "Please enlighten me." As soon as he finished speaking, he opened his palm, and a speck of light silently condensed in it. It didn't take long for the light to grow larger and larger, until it engulfed him and the painter. On the other side, Wei Yang Tian's hands suddenly shook. Rumble. The sky shook violently, and the cosmic rays began to tremble violently. The 6 divine wizards' expressions changed, and they hurriedly formed hand seals and started chanting madly. It didn't take long for the space around Wei Yang Tian to tremble violently, and strands of mysterious energy converged towards Wei Yang Tian. Meanwhile, the hunchbacked old man in front of Wei Yang Tian suddenly pressed his hands down. Rumble. A rumbling sound suddenly rang out in the sky, and then space began to crack inch by inch. The 6 divine wizards exchanged glances. In the next moment, they gathered together and formed triangular hand seals while chanting something. Soon, a huge golden sigil appeared above endless sky and the hunchbacked old man. Rumble. Beams of golden light shot out from the seal, and soon, the space around unending sky and the hunchback old man returned to normal. At the same time, the beams of golden light continued to shoot towards them. Wei Yang Tian raised his palm to block, and the golden radiance was blocked. However, the golden rays seemed to be endless as they shot towards endless sky and the hunchbacked old man in a frenzy. Right at this moment, the hunchbacked old man who stood not too far away from Midnight Heaven suddenly said, "Palace Master Midnight, I'll hold them back. You deal with this formation." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly appeared in front of endless heaven. In the next moment, he suddenly pressed his palms together and pushed them upwards. Boom! The heavens and the earth shook violently as a powerful force forcefully blocked all the beams of golden radiance. Wei Yang Tian didn't hesitate at all. Her figure shook, and then she vanished. In the next moment, numerous explosions resounded incessantly from within the formation. The expressions of the 6 divine wizards changed drastically when they witnessed this scene, and one of them turned to look at the nearby expanse of white light. "They're coming out." Rumble. The white light exploded into pieces, and it didn't take long for it to disperse completely to reveal a figure that had retreated 300 m away. This person. It was the Great Exalt. The Great Exalt stared fixedly at the painter. "You're stronger than I imagined." The painter grinned. "You're not as weak as I imagined." The Great Exalt spoke softly, "Is that so?" As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his right hand, and 3 teleportation formations suddenly appeared on his right. In next to no time, the space around them started to tremble violently, and it didn't take long for 2 old men to walk out from the teleportation formations. Behind these 2 old men were almost 100 people. These 100 people all held long spears in their hands and wore black iron armor. Their bodies exuded a powerful aura. In addition, countless monster beasts flew out from the spatial passageway. These monster beasts were huge, and their auras were extremely powerful. An army. This was an army invasion. Seeing this scene, the painter frowned. Which star field are you from? The great exalt smiled. Sky River Star Field. Hearing this, the painter's frown deepened. Sky River Star Field is very far from here. Why are you here? Saying this, she suddenly looked down at Yi Xian. For him? The great exalt smiled. Not exactly. The painter said softly, I see. You must have learned that the Mo clan is at war with my never-ending star field, so you came here to reap the benefits. The great exalt smiled. Esteemed painter, with your strength, where can't you go? Why stay here and fight for the never-ending star field, isn't that right? The painter smiled. No matter what, this is our homeland. How can we let outsiders trample on it? As soon as she finished speaking, she opened her palm, and a black brush silently condensed in it. The great exalt's expression instantly became solemn when he saw this brush. The great exalt slowly clenched his right hand. Kill. As soon as he finished speaking, he charged at the painter. As for the other two old men, they charged at Endless Sky and the hunchbacked old man instead. Because at this moment, the grand formation was on the verge of shattering under Endless Sky's bombardment. Endless Sky frowned slightly when she noticed the two old men charging at her, and then she raised her hand and slapped it forward. Rumble. The sky trembled violently. In the next moment, Endless Heaven and an old man retreated repeatedly. As they retreated, countless bolts of red lightning shot towards Endless Heaven like flaming serpents. Endless Sky smashed her fist forward. Bang! The bolts of lightning were blasted apart. However, at this moment, a powerful force suddenly swept out from the space in front of her, and then it crushed down towards her. Endless Sky's expression was icy cold, and she raised her hand and slapped down. Bang! The force was instantly blasted apart. However, countless bolts of flames shot towards her from all directions. Endless Sky turned to look at the 6 divine wizards in the distance. In the next moment, she stomped her right foot against the ground, and then she shot towards them. Everywhere she passed, the space in her path immediately shattered. The expressions of the 6 wizards changed, and they suddenly pulled their hands together. In an instant, an enormous fiery red shield of light appeared in front of Endless Sky. Endless Sky immediately swung her fist. Bang! The shield of light cracked apart. However, Endless Sky herself was blasted over 100 back as well. The wizard in the lead stared fixedly at Endless Sky and spoke in a low voice. This woman's strength is truly rare. If she hadn't exhausted herself in that battle with that expert from the Moke clan, then even the joint forces of the 6 of us wouldn't have been able to stop her. An old man by his side had a solemn expression as well. She's very strong. Has she activated a forbidden technique? Why? The wizard in the lead shook his head. It's not time yet. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian below, and soon, he frowned. Below, in front of Yi Xian, Baldi, the war army, and Lien Wanli were holding back the black-armored figures. However, the 3 of them were firmly suppressed. These black-armored figures were truly strong. Meanwhile, the Emperor Hound and the Black Qilin were holding back the countless monster beasts. This time, the 2 monster beasts had chosen to work together. If they didn't, only death awaited them. In the air, the wizard in the lead said in a low voice, "We can't let this drag on. Don't hold back." The old man beside him nodded slightly. In the next instant, he swiped his right hand to the side, and the space split open. Soon, something seemed to be sprinting towards them from the depths of the space. Soon, a stone giant ran out of the space. This stone giant was the size of a small mountain, and its eyes were blood-red and emitted crimson flames. When it appeared, it slammed its hands forward. Rumble. The entire horizon shook violently. The wizard in the lead pointed at Yi Xian below. Kill. Hearing the wizard's voice, the stone giant lowered its head to look at Yi Xian below. In the next instant, it directly charged towards Yi Xian's position. This charge caused the entire space to tremble violently. It was incomparably terrifying. Below, when she saw the giant charging over, Lian Wanli, who was fighting with her opponent, had a change of expression. She immediately gave up on the opponent in front of her, turning around to charge at the giant. However, the moment she turned, a spear pierced through her shoulder. Chi! Blood splattered everywhere. Lian Wanli didn't care. She sped up and arrived in front of the stone giant. The stone giant's right hand smashed down. Lian Wanli raised her saber and slashed down. Boom! The stone giant's fist smashed down, and Lian Wanli instantly retreated several hundred zhang. As soon as she stopped, a mouthful of blood flowed out of her mouth. Lian Wanli looked up at the stone giant and said softly, "So powerful." As she spoke, she held the azure dragon saber in her hand and threw it into the distance. Chi! The saber tore through the sky, tearing everything apart. In the distance, the stone giant suddenly stopped, turned around, and smashed down with its fist. Bang! This fist smashed down, and the azure dragon saber was directly blasted back. Not far away, Lian Wanli's pupils constricted. She dodged to the side, and the azure dragon saber slashed at the nearby city wall. Bang! The city wall trembled violently and instantly cracked. However, it didn't shatter. Right at this moment, Lian Wanli suddenly turned around, and a huge fist smashed towards her. There was no way to dodge. Lian Wanli suddenly raised her arms in front of her. Bang! Lian Wanli was instantly blasted back, and then she smashed heavily against the city wall. On the ground, Lian Wanli's mouth flowed continuously with blood. At the same time, her arms had been shattered, and her bones could be seen. Right at this moment, the stone giant suddenly charged towards Yi Xian. Seeing this scene, Lian Wanli's expression changed slightly. She charged above Yi Xian, and was about to raise her saber when she discovered that her arms couldn't move. Lian Wanli was stunned, and then she looked at the descending fist, and she was slightly at a loss. Why did this queen come to throw away her life? As she spoke up to this point, she looked at Yi Xian below, and said softly, "Dying for this fellow, it's not worth it at all." At this moment, the stone giant fist descended. Bang! Chapter 478. Just as the giant's stone fist was about to land, a sword suddenly blocked the giant's stone fist. The person holding the sword was none other than Yi Xian. The moment Yi Xian came into contact with the powerful force of the fist, his expression changed drastically. In the next moment, his whole body fell. As he fell, his left hand grabbed Lian Wanli's waist and dodged to the side, retreating to the bottom of the city wall. Yi Xian gently placed Lian Wanli on the ground. Looking at Lian Wanli on the ground, Yi Xian's expression gradually turned cold. They wanted him dead. From Qingxing until now, there were countless people who wanted him dead. It was as if these people would never die. Once one died, another would immediately jump out. And because of him, his former friends were implicated, his younger sister was implicated, and now Lian Wanli was implicated as well. Thinking of this, Yi Xian's expression gradually turned ferocious. Yi Xian gently wiped the blood from the corner of Lian Wanli's mouth. "Watch carefully, I'll help you vent your anger." As his voice fell, he turned to look at the giant stone man in the distance. The latter was also looking at him. In the next moment, the giant stone man leaped and punched at Yi Xian. With a punch, the space immediately turned illusory. Yi Xian's right hand tightly gripped the sword, his expression becoming increasingly ferocious. When the fist was about 10 feet away from him, he suddenly stabbed out with his sword. One sword to decide life and death. Wang! As the sword struck out, the sound of the sword reverberated through the sky. Yi Xian's sword directly pierced the giant stone man's fist. A head-on collision. Boom! A loud explosion resounded. Following that, the giant stone man retreated rapidly. At the same time, its giant fist began to crack inch by inch. Yi Xian suddenly leaped and slashed down with his sword. The giant stone man looked up at Yi Xian. With a fierce roar, it swept its left hand across the sky. With this sweep, the space where the arm passed directly cracked open. In the air, Yi Xian wielded his sword with both hands and slashed down. Chi! This slash directly chopped off the enormous stone arm. At the same time, numerous flying swords slashed at the enormous stone figure's throat. However, the flying swords weren't able to break through its defenses. But at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly flew to the giant's head with his sword, and in the next moment, he slashed horizontally. Chi! The giant's head was instantly sent flying. Yi Xian landed on the ground, a trickle of blood slowly seeping from the corner of his mouth. Injury. In the previous fight with Mo Xia, his wounds were too heavy. Moreover, his wounds hadn't completely healed yet. But at this moment, he didn't have time to care about this injury. His life was more important. Yi Xian slowly walked back to Lian Wanli. Lian Wanli asked softly, "Why was the power of your sword so much stronger than before?" One sword to decide life and death. Yi Xian smiled bitterly and shook his head. Actually, he was slightly depressed because the might of this sword strike was related to his anger. The angrier he was and the more he wanted to kill, the stronger this sword strike would be. On the other hand, under normal circumstances, the might of this sword strike would be ordinary. Kid! At this moment, the Emperor Hound's voice suddenly came from the distance. Yi Xian quickly turned to look at the Emperor Hound. At this moment, the Emperor Hound and the evil Qilin were being surrounded by countless demons. Although the Emperor Hound and evil Qilin were powerful, they couldn't withstand being ganged up on. The Emperor Hound suddenly said angrily, "Why aren't you coming to help?" Yi Xian smiled sheepishly, then turned to look at Lian Wanli. "I'll take you to a place to rest." After speaking, he directly stored Lian Wanli into the prison pagoda, then turned and charged towards the countless demons in the sky. Inside the prison pagoda, Lian Wanli looked around curiously. At this moment, Xiaoling appeared in front of her. Lian Wanli blinked and said, "How cute." Xiaoling, As Yi Xian charged towards the Emperor Hound, countless flying swords suddenly tore through the sky. For a time, shrill cries resounded through the sky. In the clouds, the Divine Master in the lead suddenly turned his head and looked down. When he saw that Yi Xian was still alive, his expression became extremely ugly. At this moment, he suddenly turned his head, and at this moment, endless sky was already in front of him. The holy mage's expression changed drastically when he saw this, and he suddenly pushed his hands forward. The ball of flames that floated around him transformed into a wave of flames that drowned never-ending sky. Never-ending sky smashed his fist forward. Bang! The flames were instantly shattered. Meanwhile, the holy mage had already retreated over 1 kilometer away. At the same time, 2 black-robed old men appeared in front of him. The 2 old men stared fixedly at never-ending sky. Needless to say, never-ending sky's strength had truly exceeded their expectations. This wasn't even never-ending sky's peak state. If he was at his peak state, then they probably wouldn't be able to stop him even if they joined forces. Besides never-ending sky, the other hunchbacked old man from the Moke clan was extremely terrifying as well. He'd forcefully blocked all the cosmic rays. Otherwise, never-ending sky would have been unable to separate herself. The 2 old men exchanged a glance, and then they looked at the 6 holy mages behind them. The holy mage in the lead remained silent. One of the black-robed old men frowned slightly. "Yan Sheng, why are you still hesitating?" The holy mage named Yan Sheng hesitated for a moment, and then he looked at the 5 people behind him. "Activate the restrictive spell." As soon as he finished speaking, the 6 of them formed hand seals and started chanting silently. It didn't take long for an enormous red formation to appear in the sky, and then the sky instantly darkened. The ground was dyed blood red. In the distance, never-ending sky frowned slightly as she looked at the red formation, and then she slowly clenched her right hand. At this moment, an enormous blood-red eye suddenly appeared within the red formation, and it looked directly at never-ending sky. In the next moment, a pillar of blood-red light burst out from the eye. Everywhere it passed, space was instantly plunged into pitch-black darkness. Meanwhile, never-ending sky opened her palm and spun it lightly. A powerful force suddenly swept out from the center of her palm. Bang! Deafening rumbles resounded incessantly above the clouds in the heavens and the earth. Unending heaven was forced to retreat explosively, and with this retreat, he retreated a full 10,000 feet. Meanwhile, the two black-robed old men were about to attack when Yanxing suddenly said, "Let's deal with Yi Xian first." Deal with Yi Xian first. Both of them recovered from their shock. Their main objective this time wasn't just to destroy the Mo clan and the never-ending starfield, but also to get the treasure in Yi Xian's possession. Both of them turned around and flashed down. Down below, Yi Xian seemed to sense something, and his expression changed. He was just about to attack when a Gui appeared in front of him, and then a blood-red scythe shot into the sky. In midair, one of the old men suddenly slapped his palm down. Bang! Space warped, and a Gui was pushed back repeatedly before he could even touch the old man. But in the next moment, he vanished mysteriously, and when he reappeared, he was already in front of the black-robed old man. At the same time, a blood-red scythe silently appeared at the old man's throat. Hiss! A ripping sound resounded. However, the old man had vanished on the spot, and a Gui suddenly turned around and swung his scythe down. Bang! A Gui was blasted backward. However, the moment he flew back, his scythe flew out of his hand and slashed at a black shadow. Bang! The black shadow shattered, and the old man revealed his true form. There was a long, bloody gash on his chest. Seeing this, the black-robed old man's face turned ugly. Nearby, a Gui looked at Yi Xian and said, "Let's go." Yi Xian was about to speak, but the two old men suddenly vanished. A Gui's expression changed, and he charged forward with his scythe. When he saw this, Yi Xian didn't hesitate at all, and he swung his sword swiftly. Hiss! A ray of sword light tore through the sky. But it didn't take long for the ray of sword light to shatter. At the same time, a black-robed old man appeared in front of Yi Xian, and then he slammed his fist at Yi Xian's face. The powerful force caused the space around Yi Xian to crack inch by inch. In the face of the power of these people, the space was so fragile. Yi Xian held his sword with both hands and swung it forward. He didn't dare to hold back at all. The sword light was as dazzling as the sun, but it only lasted for a moment. The ray of sword light instantly shattered, and Yi Xian retreated repeatedly. He hadn't even stopped when the black-robed old man appeared in front of him again, and then the old man slapped his palm at his face. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly grinned. The next second, the sword in his hand quietly changed to the soul-suppressing sword. Yi Xian's sword stabbed the old man's palm. Bang! Yi Xian was instantly sent flying. However, the black-robed old man didn't move. His eyes were wide open, and they were filled with terror. But it didn't take long for the terror in his eyes to vanish. At this moment, he couldn't move. Soul fixation. In the distance, Yi Xian held his sword with both hands. Blood flowed incessantly from the corners of his mouth, and his chest was dyed red with blood. He knew very well that his strength was far inferior to the black-robed old man, so he could only rely on the soul-suppressing sword. Of course, it wasn't just the soul-suppressing sword, it was the soul-suppressing sword and the soul-fixation sword. If it was just the soul-suppressing sword alone, it wouldn't be able to stop the old man's soul. Fortunately, the soul-suppressing sword and the soul-fixation sword were still effective against the old man. Otherwise, he would really be dead. Even though he wasn't dead, he felt as if his entire body had been sucked dry after using that attack. Moreover, he could clearly sense that Soul had become much weaker. At this moment, Soul's voice resounded in Yi Xian's mind. "Young lord. You can't use that sword technique with me anymore. I need to rest." In next to no time, Soul's voice vanished completely. On the spot, Yi Xian's face was solemn because he realized that Soul's voice was very weak. Obviously, that attack hadn't just consumed a great deal of his strength, it had consumed a great deal of Soul's strength as well. Because he still couldn't fully utilize Soul's strength, he needed Soul's cooperation most of the time. Therefore, every time he used Soul, it consumed a great deal of Soul's strength. At this moment, Ague was suddenly pushed back. After being pushed back, the other black-robed old man turned to look at Yi Xian, and he stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "What did you do to him?" Yi Xian was silent. The black-robed old man's face turned ferocious, and he directly charged at Yi Xian. Yi Xian suddenly picked up the soul-suppressing sword and pointed it at the black-robed old man. "Old man, I'm not joking. If I hit you with this sword, you might die." The black-robed old man. Chapter 479. The black-robed elder stopped in front of Yi Xian. The black-robed elder stared at Yi Xian. To be more precise, he stared at the soul-suppressing sword in Yi Xian's hand. He frowned when he saw the sword. A creation-grade artifact. Yi Xian grinned. "Good eye." The black-robed elder said in a low voice, "Impossible. Even a creation-grade artifact can't kill him in one hit." He looked at Yi Xian. "You must have some trump card." Yi Xian's expression changed. He said angrily, "I don't have any trump card." "Get over here." The black-robed elder stared at Yi Xian. "Do you think the old man will be fooled by you?" Yi Xian flew into a rage out of humiliation. He charged at the black-robed elder with his sword in hand. The black-robed elder's expression changed. He didn't attack. Instead, he retreated hundreds of meters to put some distance between him and Yi Xian. Yi Xian was about to chase after the black-robed elder when he thought of something. He almost forgot that he couldn't defeat the black-robed elder. Opposite Yi Xian, the old man in the black robe glanced at Yi Xian with a hint of wariness in his eyes. The divine sorcerer in the air shouted angrily, "What are you waiting for? Kill him now." The black-robed elder looked at the sky. The divine sorcerer and the others couldn't stop Wei Yang Tian. The black-robed elder's expression darkened. He looked at Yi Xian again. Yi Xian was swinging the soul-suppressing sword. The black-robed elder clenched his right fist. A Gue appeared next to Yi Xian. The black-robed elder's expression darkened when he saw a Gue. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Senior, attack." Hearing Yi Xian's words, a Gue was slightly taken aback. In the next moment, he rushed out with his sickle in hand. The black-robed old man squinted his eyes. He did not choose to retreat. His body shook and he threw a punch at a Gue. Boom! With a punch, a Gue was sent flying backward. Almost at the same time, a flying sword suddenly appeared in front of the black-robed old man. The sudden appearance of the flying sword caused the black-robed old man's face to change, as he crossed his arms in front of him. Boom! The sword light shattered, but in the next moment, a few more flying swords slashed at him from different angles. The black-robed old man's expression turned savage, as he slapped his hands towards his sides. Rumble. The surrounding space trembled violently. Yi Xian's flying swords were all annihilated. But as soon as the flying swords were destroyed, a Gue appeared in front of the black-robed elder. At the same time, a blood-red scythe slashed at the black-robed elder's throat. Perfect combination. The black-robed old man could not dodge at all. He grabbed the scythe with both hands, but at this time, a flying sword slashed at his head. Boom! The black-robed old man retreated hundreds of feet away. At the same time, his head was split open by the sword. But he did not die, only his body became a little illusory. Beside a Gue, Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Not dead?" A Gue said in a low voice, "At this level, there are many ways to preserve one's life." Yi Xian nodded slightly, "You fight close combat, I'll attack from afar." A Gue disappeared on the spot, and when he reappeared, he was already in front of the black-robed old man. The black-robed old man's pupils shrank, and without hesitation, he turned around and fled. He knew very well that if he continued to fight, he would definitely die. Especially Yi Xian's flying sword, it was too disgusting. The black-robed old man was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, he was back in the sky. But at this time, a shadow suddenly appeared above his head, and in the next moment, a powerful force swept across the sky. Down. The black-robed old man's expression changed drastically, and he swiftly raised his hands to block. Rumble. The sky trembled violently as the black-robed old man descended swiftly. Meanwhile, a ray of light flashed. Hiss. The ray of light pierced through the black-robed old man's throat, and then his head instantly flew into the air while blood sprayed out like a fountain. The black-robed old man's soul was about to flee, but a flying sword was even faster and instantly pierced through his soul. At the same time, the flying sword absorbed his soul. Yi Xian gestured with his right hand, and the soul-suppressing sword returned to his grasp. He raised his head and looked towards the distance, and there was a man standing there. It was Wuxia, and he was the one who'd attacked the black-robed old man just now. At this moment, it seemed like Wuxia's injuries had recovered slightly. Wuxia gazed at Yi Xian, and then he fell silent for a short moment before he suddenly pointed at the 6 divine wizards in the sky. "Support me." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly stomped his right foot against the ground. Bang! Wuxia soared into the sky and charged towards the 6 divine mages. Meanwhile, Yi Xian lightly pressed 2 fingers together, and then a sword of energy silently condensed. Both he and Wuxia were very clearly aware that even though the Mo clan and the never-ending Starfield were fighting to the death, they had no choice but to join forces now. Because all of them would die if they didn't. A wisp of ridicule arose on the corners of Yan Xing's mouth when he saw Wuxia charge towards him. A tiny Saint Realm cultivator. Right at this moment, Wuxia's speed instantly rose explosively, and he arrived in front of Yan Xing in the blink of an eye. Yan Xing's expression changed slightly when he witnessed this scene. He suddenly shook his left hand, and then a strand of dark blue flames swept out from his palm. Wuxia didn't dodge, and he allowed the palm to strike his chest. However, he smashed his fist against Yan Xing's chest as well. Bang! Wuxia was blasted flying while Yan Xing retreated repeatedly. At the same time, a flying sword silently arrived in front of Yan Xing. Yan Xing's expression changed drastically, and he made a grabbing motion with his left hand from afar. This grasp directly grabbed the flying sword, but in the next moment, there was another flying sword behind the flying sword. The divine sorcerer's expression changed drastically, and he hastily dodged to the side. However, it was still a little too late, and the flying sword directly chopped down on his left shoulder. Chi! The divine sorcerer's entire arm was instantly sent flying. At this moment, Wuxia suddenly appeared in front of him again. Yan Xing was horrified when he saw this scene. At this moment, he had no choice but to give up on fighting against unending sky. He hastily withdrew all his energy, formed a seal with both hands, and chanted softly. Soon, the space in front of Wuxia suddenly trembled, and powerful forces continuously seeped out from the space. Wuxia, who had just arrived in front of him, was instantly sent flying. However, at this moment, Yan Xing suddenly turned around. Not far away, Unending Sky was walking towards him, and Unending Sky was carrying 2 bloody heads in his hands. Yan Xing's expression instantly darkened when he saw this scene. Previously, the 6 of them had barely been able to restrain Unending Sky, but just now, he had been restrained by Wuxia and Yi Xian's joint forces. It was this moment that had directly caused them to collapse. Unending Sky had lost control of himself. At the same time, after 2 of the 6 of them died, the formation could no longer be maintained. The hunchbacked elder from the Mo clan in the distance was also no longer restrained, and he immediately walked towards them. On the other side, the great sovereign was still fighting Master Painter. Both of them were shrouded in white light, and the battle situation was unknown. As for below, the Unending Star region's experts had already joined forces with the Moke clan, and their army had already been stopped. Yan Sheng was silent, and no one knew what he was thinking. At this moment, Unending Sky tossed out his hands, and the two bloody heads instantly shattered. The bloody head shattered instantly. She walked towards Yan Sheng, but the latter remained silent. Unending Sky was just about to attack when Yan Sheng suddenly turned around and looked into the distance. The foreign realm doesn't want that treasure anymore. Unending Sky raised his head and looked into the distance. Somewhere there, the space suddenly split open, and soon, a middle-aged man walked out. Seeing this, Unending Sky frowned slightly. These enemies came one after another, and there was no end to them. The middle-aged man gazed at Yan Sheng and said with a smile, "The foreign realm has given up on this treasure. As compensation, the Moke Galaxy and Unending Star region will belong to the foreign realm in the future. My Sky River region only wants that treasure." Yan Sheng said softly, "Thank you, Heavenly Sovereign." The middle-aged man smiled, and then he gazed at the nearby Unending Sky and said with a smile, "Palace Master Unending, please enlighten me." Unending Sky's face was expressionless. Suddenly, she vanished. The smile on the middle-aged man's face widened, and then his body turned illusory in the next moment. It didn't take long for both Unending Sky and the middle-aged man to vanish. Yan Sheng's expression was extremely solemn. Unending Sky's strength was truly too shocking. If she hadn't exhausted too much of her strength in the battle with the hunchbacked elder from the Moke clan, then no one here would be able to kill her in a one-on-one battle. The hunchbacked elder from the Moke clan gazed at Yan Sheng, and he was about to attack when an afterimage suddenly appeared in front of him. In the next moment, the space around him turned illusory, and then rays of cold light shot incessantly towards him. The hunchbacked elder's face fell when he saw this. Obviously, the other party had come prepared, and they wanted to restrain him and Unending Sky. After a moment of silence, the hunchbacked elder's voice suddenly resounded in the sky. "The Moke clan will fight to the death. Fight to the death. Fight to the last man." At this moment, all the members of the Moke clan looked up into the sky. Mo Xia was looking at the sky as well. His face was expressionless, and his right hand was clenched tightly. Zhua Qing and the Earth Fiend stood by Mo Xia's side. On the other side, Yi Xian stood silently. Not far from him were the War Army, Baldi, and some genius experts from the Great Wall of Buried Heavens. At this moment, all of them were heavily injured. Both sides had fought terribly earlier, and the sudden appearance of the foreign land and Sky River sector's experts had caused them to suffer heavy losses. In terms of overall strength, the Never-Ending Sector and the Moke clan combined couldn't compare to the foreign land and Sky River sector. Especially those powerful demonic beasts. The Emperor Hound and the Evil Qilin were having a hard time resisting them. Fortunately, they had these two demonic beasts to support them. Otherwise, the Moke clan and the Never-Ending Sector would have been finished long ago. At this moment, Yan Sheng suddenly looked down at Yi Xian. Behind him were 3 divine sorcerers. 4 peak-level super experts. Yan Sheng looked down at Yi Xian and the others and said softly, "Give it all you have." As soon as he said that, the 3 sorcerers behind him suddenly took out 3 teleportation arrays. Soon, countless experts rushed out of these teleportation arrays. In an instant, the entire sky turned pitch black. Below, Mo Xia suddenly looked at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian also turned to look at Mo Ku. Mo Ku said, "Can you still use that sword of yours?" Yi Xian was slightly stunned. Soon, he knew that Mo Ku was talking about the soul-suppressing sword, so he shook his head. Mo Ku nodded. With a flick of his finger, a sword fell in front of Yi Xian. The sword was about 4 feet long, dark gray in color. The blade was extremely thin, and the tip was extremely long. On the tip of the sword, there was a dot of black light. Aside from that, there were 2 pitch-black eyes on both sides of the hilt. Yi Xian was puzzled. Mo Xia said softly, "Mo Ku's sword, one of the Moke clan's ultimate treasures. It has the power of Moke and the Moke sword. I'll lend it to you. As he spoke, he paused and said, I'll lend it to you. Yi Xian. Chapter 480. The Moke Sword. Yi Xian looked at the sword in front of him, stunned and confused. Mo Xia looked up at the sky and said softly, if we don't join forces, none of us will survive. Behind Mo Xia, Zhua Qing and the other Moke clan experts were silent. The never-ending Starfield experts on Yi Xian's side were also silent. Join forces. At that moment, both the Moke clan and the never-ending Starfield experts understood one thing. If they didn't join forces, only death awaited them. If they joined forces, there might be a way out. Although they had once been enemies, they had to join forces for survival now. Yi Xian held the Moke sword in front of him. Instantly, a powerful force surged out of the sword and gathered in his body. Yi Xian's body trembled. He opened his eyes abruptly. There were two blood-red pupils in his eyes. Yi Xian's expression changed. He quickly let go of the sword and looked at Mo Xia. Mo Xia said softly, the Moke sword. Since the first ancestor of the Moke clan, no one has been able to use this sword. This sword has the power of the Moke and the intent to kill. Since the first ancestor, no one in the Moke clan has been able to use this sword. The first ancestor's soul gave this sword to me, hoping that I could use it. However, I'm not interested in swordsmanship, so... As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. I'll lend it to you for now. Yi Xian was silent. The moment he held the sword, he felt a powerful force enter his body. But at the same time, he felt like he wasn't himself. That force wanted to enslave him. And in that instant, his mind was filled with murderous intent. It wanted to kill everything. Mo Xia suddenly said, you don't dare to take it? Yi Xian shook his head. We're all going to die. Why wouldn't I dare to take it? As soon as he finished speaking, he held the Moke sword. Boom! A powerful force instantly surged into Yi Xian's body. In an instant, Yi Xian's eyes opened again. Within his eye sockets were two blood-red pupils. Yi Xian gripped his sword tightly in his right hand, his body trembling uncontrollably. Next to Yi Xian, War Army said in a deep voice, Brother Yi, are you okay? Yi Xian said with a trembling voice, Kill, I want to kill someone. War Army, beside Yi Xian, Mo Xia looked up at the god sorcerers and said softly, Kill. As soon as he finished speaking, he lightly stomped his right foot and soared into the sky. Earth Fiend and the others followed closely behind, but Zhua Qing did not follow them. On Yi Xian's side, Baldy and the others did not want to be outdone. They all soared into the sky. Yi Xian was still in his original position. At this moment, he was almost unable to control that power. He realized that his mind was a little chaotic. At this moment, Zhua Qing, who was next to Yi Xian, suddenly said, Kill. Kill to get rid of that power. Yi Xian directly soared into the sky and charged toward the foreign experts in the sky. In the sky, God Sorcerer Yansheng looked at Mo Xia and the others who were charging toward him expressionlessly. Behind him, countless experts rushed toward Mo Xia and the others. Mo Xia, who was charging at the forefront, suddenly reached out with his right hand and grabbed, boom. The space in front of him directly distorted and became illusory. The next moment, a powerful force swept out from this space. In an instant, the entire sky was filled with screams. Yansheng looked at Mo Xia and was about to make a move. At this moment, Mr. Bai and the Moke clan's Mo Tian Chi suddenly appeared in front of him. They naturally couldn't allow Yansheng to attack Mo Xia, Yi Xian, and the others. Because Mo Xia, Yi Xian, and the others were currently unable to resist Yansheng. Mr. Bai and Mo Jiao looked at each other. This chapter is not over, please continue to the next page. They directly rushed toward Yansheng. Yansheng's eyes gradually turned cold. Sacrificial array. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly pulled his hands and a fiery red flag appeared in front of him. Behind him, 3 fiery red flags also appeared in front of the 3 god sorcerers. In the next moment, the 4 fiery red flags directly became illusory. At the same time, the surrounding space suddenly heated up. Waves of fire seeped out from the surrounding space and drowned Mr. Bai and Mo Tian Qi Yan Xing turned to look at one of the god sorcerers. "You go deal with that Yi Xian." The god sorcerer nodded slightly. In the next moment, he disappeared on the spot. At the same time, a wave of fire fell from the sky and headed straight for Yi Xian. Below, Yi Xian seemed to have sensed it and suddenly looked up. In the next moment, he suddenly stomped his right foot and transformed into a ray of sword light that shot into the sky. Just like that, a ray of fire and a ray of sword light collided in the sky in the most brutal way possible. Boom! The entire sky trembled. Countless rays of sword light and fire shook the sky, and Yi Xian was shaken down by the powerful force. On the ground below, boom! Yi Xian landed on the ground, and the entire ground shook violently. At this moment, his body had cracked and was still covered in flames. However, a powerful force was continuously gathering towards his body. Mo-ku force. This force was constantly repairing Yi Xian's body, but it was also constantly corroding his mind. If it wasn't for his strong mind, he would have been enslaved by this force. In the sky, the god sorcerer stared at Yi Xian. He didn't expect Yi Xian to be able to resist his attack. One had to know that his realm was several levels higher than Yi Xian's. Monster. Not only was Yi Xian a monster, but Mo Xia was also a monster. The god sorcerer turned to look at Mo Xia in the distance. At this moment, Mo Xia was crazily slaughtering. Apart from the experts of the older generation, almost no one could stop him. Apart from that, the evil Qilin and Emperor Hound were also extremely terrifying. After the 2 evil beasts joined forces, they were able to stop most of the demons. If this continued, if the Sky Sovereign and Great Sovereign couldn't win, their situation would become extremely bad. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly transformed into a ray of sword light and shot into the sky. The god sorcerer withdrew his thoughts and looked down at Yi Xian. Wherever the sword light passed, the space was torn apart inch by inch. The god sorcerer formed a seal with both hands. In the next moment, the space in front of him began to violently tremble like waves. When Yi Xian rushed in front of him, he suddenly looked at Yi Xian. Forbidden space technique, freeze. As soon as he said that, the space around him and Yi Xian suddenly trembled and rapidly shrank, trapping Yi Xian in place. The god sorcerer coldly looked at Yi Xian. "You're still too young." At this moment, the space suddenly returned to normal. Yi Xian's sword pierced straight into the space between the god sorcerer's eyebrows. Seeing this, the god sorcerer's expression changed drastically. He didn't expect Yi Xian to be able to break through his forbidden technique so easily. In his opinion, this was simply impossible. However, he didn't have time to think so much. He pulled his hands forward and an illusory shield appeared in front of him. Yi Xian's sword arrived. Rumble. The illusory shield shook violently and then cracked. Yi Xian held the sword and suddenly spun. Boom! The shield suddenly shattered, and the sword pierced straight through. However, at this moment, the god sorcerer had already retreated hundreds of feet. At the same time, one after another fire arrows were launched at Yi Xian like a storm. In the distance, Yi Xian suddenly roared angrily. The next moment, he held the sword and swung it forward. In an instant, countless sword lights shot out from the Moke sword. This chapter is not over. Please continue. They shot out. Rumble, rumble, rumble. For a moment, there was a series of explosions. In the distance, the god sorcerer suddenly formed a strange seal with both hands. Soon, tens of thousands of fire arrows appeared around him. The god sorcerer looked at Yi Xian in the distant sea of fire. He suddenly formed a seal with both hands. 10,000 flames burning the heavens. As soon as he said that, the fire arrows suddenly pierced through space and shot toward Yi Xian in the distance. In the distant sea of fire, Yi Xian suddenly raised his head. Countless sword lights shot out from his eyes. However, this time, the sword lights were gray in color. A wave of sword lights swept out and instantly destroyed the fire arrows. The god sorcerer was about to attack when Yi Xian suddenly stomped his right foot. Pust! A ray of sword light flashed across the battlefield. The god sorcerer's pupils suddenly constricted. In the next moment, a thin layer of fire appeared all over his body. At this moment, Yi Xian was already behind the god sorcerer. Yi Xian stood ramrod straight. There was a drop of blood on the tip of the moke sword in his hand. Behind Yi Xian, the god sorcerer looked forward in disbelief. He was still forming a seal with both hands, and a powerful force was surging around him. How did he die? Of course he knew. At that moment, Yi Xian's speed instantly increased by at least 5 times. He was less than 100 feet away from Yi Xian just now. At such a short distance, the 5 times speed instantly took his life. Just a little bit more. If Yi Xian had been a little bit slower, even just a little bit, he would have been able to block this fatal sword strike. Unfortunately, it was just this little bit that cost him his life. Gradually, the god sorcerer's gaze dissipated. At this moment, a sword suddenly entered the god sorcerer's body. Soul-suppressing sword. In an instant, the god sorcerer's soul was directly devoured. At this moment, Soul's somewhat excited voice sounded in Yi Xian's mind. Young master, this person's soul and mental strength are extremely powerful. If I devour 2 more, I will definitely be able to greatly improve. Moreover, I will be able to unlock new moves. In the air, Yi Xian held the sword in his hand tightly. At this moment, he still had a trace of rationality, so he could naturally understand the soul-suppressing sword's words. However, he already felt that he could not suppress the moke force and the desire to kill. Kill. Right now, his mind was filled with the thought of killing. At this moment, the soul-suppressing sword returned to Yi Xian's body. Young master, the power in that sword does not belong to you. Remember, do not be controlled by it. Otherwise, young master will be enslaved by the sword. Enslaved by the sword? Yi Xian was stunned, and then he asked, what do you mean? Soul said in a low voice, a person can enslave the sword, and the sword can also enslave a person. Young master, remember, do not be enslaved by the sword. Otherwise, it will control you to attack the people closest to you and completely cut off all your thoughts. At this point, she paused slightly, and then she said, if young master is controlled, it is very likely that he will personally kill your sister. No. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly roared angrily, Motherf ***, how dare it? As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly picked up the moke sword and roared like a wild beast, you better keep a low profile. The moke sword. P.S. Recently, I've been writing a fanfic. The fanfic will be combined with the main text, and it can be considered as explaining some things about the Great Sword Realm. As for the fanfic, whose fanfic do you want to see? Because the big shots in the Great Sword Realm all have their own lives, and there are many things that they haven't explained clearly. I will read your messages and suggestions carefully. End of this chapter. Chapter 481. It had to be said that right now, Yi Xian was extremely irascible. He absolutely would not allow anyone to harm Yi Ling, including himself. In his rage, Yi Xian forcibly suppressed the corrosion of that power. His mind became clearer and clearer. However, he was still in a bit of a difficult situation. Because that power was too strong. It was so strong that he could not control it right now. Yi Xian looked up into the sky. The next moment, he turned into a gray sword light and shot into the sky. Slaughter. He had to vent this power. Otherwise, this power would sooner or later devour him. As the Moke clan and the never-ending Starfield joined forces, the battle situation gradually changed. Because right now, no one could stop Yi Xian and Mo Xie. The two were practically invincible, and the two evil beasts were growing stronger as they fought. The never-ending Starfield and the Moke clan began to gain the upper hand. In the void, a white light suddenly dissipated. The painter and the great sovereign appeared in the sky. However, at this moment, the great sovereign's face was pale and he was extremely weak. The great sovereign stared at the distant painter. "I underestimated you." Underestimated. Only now did he realize that this artist's strength was much greater than he had expected. Because in his opinion, he and the painter were equally matched. Unfortunately, after a round of fighting, he had been completely defeated. In the distance, the painter walked towards the great sovereign. "You underestimated the Moke clan and the never-ending Starfield." The great sovereign glanced down. At this moment, the never-ending Starfield and the Moke clan had begun to counterattack. The situation was extremely unfavorable for the Sky River Starfield and the Foreignland Starfield. Especially Mo Xia, Yi Xian, and the others. Besides the experts of the older generation, everyone else couldn't even last a single round in front of these two people. At this moment, the painter raised her jade-like hand and a powerful force instantly enveloped the great sovereign. The great sovereign looked up at the painter and grinned. "Do you think you can win?" The painter frowned slightly. The great sovereign said again, "You will never know who will attack you this time." The painter muttered to herself. The next moment, she clenched her jade-like hand. Boom! The great sovereign directly turned into nothingness. She raised her head to look at the sky, and in the next instant, she waved her jade-like hands, and a black brush tore through the sky. In the next instant, countless screams rang out. "Retreat!" Suddenly, a voice resounded in the sky. Soon, the experts of the Milky Way star region and the foreign domain began to retreat, and before long, they had retreated to the sky above the clouds. In the air, the celestial venerate and endless heaven appeared before everyone again. Wei Yang Tian had his hands behind his back, his face pale, while the heavenly lord was expressionless. From the outside, he did not seem to be injured. At this moment, Painter appeared beside endless heaven. The painter looked at the Empyrean. "It's over." The Empyrean glanced at the painter and faintly smiled. "No, this is just the beginning." The painter said softly, "Is that so?" The celestial venerable said softly, "You've underestimated the importance of that treasure." As he spoke, he turned to look at the horizon. "We've already given it our all. Are you still not going to act?" Hearing the sky sovereign's words, unending sky, and the painter frowned. Everyone looked in the direction the celestial venerable was looking at. Soon, the space there split open, and an old man in purple robes walked out. The purple-robed old man wore a square official hat and held a long purple token in his right hand. On his left shoulder, there were two words, "Order." Seeing the purple-robed old man, the painter immediately frowned. Star Order Enforcer. The universe was vast and boundless, with countless star regions. In these star regions, there was a group of people who protected the universe and maintained its order. These people were the Star Order Enforcers. The most mysterious and powerful group of people in the vast universe. Seeing the old man appear, the painter and endless heaven understood that the foreign domain and the Milky Way star region were just pawns. The Star Order Enforcer was the true mastermind. In the air, the purple-robed old man looked at the painter and unending sky. "This Yi Xian is the person we want." The painter looked at the purple-robed old man. "Your goal is not just Yi Xian. What I don't understand is that your goal is only Yi Xian. Why are you attacking the never-ending star region?" The purple-robed old man said calmly, "Don't the never-ending star region and the Moke clan know?" The painter looked at unending sky. Unending sky said calmly, "They once contacted us and demanded that the never-ending star region pay tribute to them every 5 years. I refused." The hunchbacked old man from the Moke clan walked over. The Moke clan also refused. The painter nodded slightly. "I understand." In the air, the purple-robed old man glanced at the painter and the other two. "Surrender, and you will be spared." "Surrender?" Unending Sky sneered. You want me to surrender? Who do you think you are? Next to Unending Sky, the hunchbacked old man chuckled. Surrender? The Moke clan has never knelt to anyone since our ancestors. In the air, the purple-robed old man's expression was cold. You have a death wish. As soon as he finished speaking, he tapped the token in his right hand. Instantly, a huge stone platform appeared in front of him. There were nearly 100 teleportation arrays on the stone platform. Soon, the teleportation arrays began to tremble, as if something was about to come out. In the air, the purple-robed old man looked down at Unending Sky and the others. Finally, his gaze landed on Yi Xian. At that moment, Yi Xian's eyes were tightly shut, and his body trembled uncontrollably. Suppress. He was forcefully suppressing the Moke power in his body and the desire to kill. As if sensing the purple-robed old man's gaze, Yi Xian looked up at him. The next moment, an illusory Shao Ta appeared between his brows. When they saw the illusory pagoda, the expressions on the faces of all the spectators changed. A treasure. The purple-robed old man stared at the Shao Ta. Yi Xian suddenly grinned. Do you want it? The purple-robed old man narrowed his eyes. At that moment, Yi Xian said, I'm not giving it to you. Everyone, the purple-robed old man looked at Yi Xian, his eyes gradually turning cold. Don't worry, I'll get it myself. At that moment, Yi Xian raised his sword and charged at the purple-robed old man. The purple-robed old man looked at Yi Xian expressionlessly. In the air, a hand suddenly pressed down on Yi Xian's shoulder. Painter. Painter looked at Yi Xian. Can you beat him? Yi Xian's voice trembled. I don't know. Painter's mouth twitched. If you don't know, why are you still going? Yi Xian was confused. Do I have to go? Painter, at that moment, the purple-robed old man suddenly looked at the Celestial Venerate and the others. We only want that treasure. The rest belongs to your Sky River sector and the foreign sector. The Celestial Venerate was silent. The purple-robed old man said calmly, that treasure is supreme. Even if I give it to you, you can't keep it. Understand? The Celestial Venerate said in a low voice, what is it? Why, the purple-robed old man interrupted the Celestial Venerate. The more you know, the faster you die. The Celestial Venerate glanced at the purple-robed old man and said no more. At that moment, not far away, Yi Xian suddenly said, why wait for them to come? Everyone looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said, we can kill them before they come. Next to Yi Xian, Baldy said softly, that makes sense. Painter looked at Midnight Sky, who said calmly, kill. Kill. As soon as she finished speaking, she and Master Painter rushed out. The hunchbacked old man also rushed out. Behind the three, the Moke clan and the never-ending sector's powerhouses also rushed out. In the air, the purple-robed old man frowned. The next moment, he looked at Yan Sheng and the Great Sovereign. Stop them. The Great Sovereign hesitated, then directly rushed toward Midnight Sky. As for the gods' wizards, they started to target Painter. As for the hunchbacked old man, he was stopped by a shadow. This shadow was the expert who had fought with him before. Yi Xian suddenly said, destroy the formation. As his voice faded, a flying sword pierced through the air. It was extremely fast and arrived before the stone platform in an instant. However, just as it was about to slash at the stone platform, a hand suddenly grabbed the sword light. It was the purple-robed old man's hand. The purple-robed old man clenched his fist lightly. Boom! The sword light shattered. The purple-robed old man looked down at Yi Xian, and then he appeared in front of Yi Xian without any warning. His right hand grabbed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian instantly felt like his entire body had been frozen in place. Right at that moment, a white shadow appeared in front of him. It was Mr. Bai. Mr. Bai punched, but the purple-robed old man didn't stop there. He pressed his hand against Mr. Bai's fist. Rumble. A powerful force suddenly swept out, and Yi Xian, who was behind Mr. White, was suddenly shaken to the point of retreating repeatedly. Meanwhile, a flying sword silently appeared at the purple-robed old man's throat. The purple-robed old man frowned slightly. His figure shook, and the flying sword slashed through the air. However, it slashed through the air, and he was already behind Mr. Bai. He didn't attack Mr. Bai. Instead, he grabbed at Yi Xian. He was extremely fast. Yi Xian couldn't dodge because the purple-robed old man was too fast. He held the moke sword with both hands and slashed forward. Hiss! A dark gray sword light slashed down viciously. Boom! The ray of sword light instantly shattered, but the purple-robed old man was pushed back by around 3 m. He glanced at his palm, and then at Yi Xian with a frown. Your sword has some skill. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. Meanwhile, a powerful force assaulted him from behind. The purple-robed old man frowned slightly, and then he turned around and slammed his fist forward. It was a very ordinary punch, but it made Mr. Bai retreat by 300 m. As soon as Mr. Bai stopped, the space around him shattered and transformed into pitch-black darkness. The purple-robed old man glanced at Mr. Bai. I underestimated you. But I don't have time to deal with you now. As he spoke, he turned around to look at Yi Xian, and then he shot explosively towards Yi Xian. He was so fast that Yi Xian couldn't even see him. Yi Xian stomped his right foot against the ground and soared into the air. At the same time, he slashed down with his sword in both hands. However, his sword was stopped by a hand. The purple-robed old man's hand. The purple-robed old man looked at Yi Xian with an expressionless face. He was about to attack when a shadow suddenly flashed to his side, and then a fist smashed towards his head. The purple-robed old man frowned slightly and blocked with his left hand. Bang! The powerful force pushed the purple-robed old man back by around 3 m, but he didn't stop. Numerous flying swords slashed towards him. Bang! The purple-robed old man retreated by another few meters. Meanwhile, there was another person by Yi Xian's side. Mo Xia. Mo Xia looked at Yi Xian. I'll fight him in close combat. You use your flying swords. Any problems? Yi Xian fell silent for a moment, and then he said, kill him. Chapter 482. As Yi Xian's voice faded, Mo Xia charged forward. Mo Xia's speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he arrived in front of the purple-robed old man. The purple-robed old man was expressionless. When Mo Xia punched at him, his body suddenly became illusory. Chi! Mo Xia's punch hit empty air. Mo Xia's expression changed slightly. He turned around, but at this moment, a palm imprinted on his chest. Pung! Mo Xia's entire body flew back. However, almost at the same moment Mo Xia flew back, a flying sword quietly appeared behind the purple-robed old man. The purple-robed old man turned around, and with a shake of his body, the flying sword appeared behind him. The purple-robed old man looked at Yi Xian and clenched his fist. A powerful force instantly enveloped Yi Xian. Chop! Yi Xian's voice suddenly rang out. Immediately, a sword light tore down in front of Yi Xian. The purple-robed old man's force was directly torn open by Yi Xian's sword. The purple-robed old man squinted his eyes and was about to attack again. However, Mo Xia suddenly appeared behind him. The purple-robed old man frowned slightly. He turned around and punched out. Mo Xia also punched out. Force against force. Rumble. Mo Xia's entire body was instantly blasted hundreds of meters away by the purple-robed old man's fist. However, at this moment, several flying swords suddenly slashed at the purple-robed old man. However, the purple-robed old man's body instantly became illusory. The flying swords seemed to have slashed at the air, and had no effect at all. At this moment, the purple-robed old man had already appeared in front of Yi Xian. He was about to attack when Yi Xian's eyes suddenly opened, and a wave of sword light vibrated out. The purple-robed old man frowned slightly, and his arm blocked in front of him. Rumble. Rumble. The purple-robed old man retreated continuously. This time, he retreated a full 30 meters. After he stopped, he glanced at his arm. His arm was covered in sword scars. The purple-robed old man's face darkened. He looked at Yi Xian and was about to speak, but behind him, an afterimage was rapidly flying towards him. Mo-sia. The purple-robed old man turned around and slapped down. Rumble. Space instantly ruptured. Mo-sia, who had just arrived in front of the purple-robed elder, was knocked flying. Almost at the same time, he turned around and chopped down with his palm. Chi. A wave of sword light was directly shattered by him. The violet-robed old man gazed at Yi Xian from afar, and he was just about to attack once more when a series of explosions suddenly resounded from the distant horizon. The purple-robed elder turned around and saw Yan Sheng and the others retreating in the sky. Moreover, there were only 2 divine wizards left. The old man frowned slightly when he witnessed this scene. He immediately withdrew his gaze and looked at Yi Xian while slowly clenching his right hand. He had to end the battle quickly. The purple-robed elder suddenly disappeared. In the distance, Yi Xian's expression changed slightly. He was about to make a move when a white figure suddenly appeared in front of him. In the next moment, the purple-robed old man retreated several dozen zhang. This white figure was none other than Endless Heaven. Endless Sky looked coldly at the purple-robed elder. You like bullying the weak so much? The purple-robed elder stared coldly at Endless Sky. You will pay a painful price for your stubbornness. Endless Sky sneered. Is that so? As she spoke, she turned to look at Yi Xian. Go break that formation. Yi Xian nodded and charged towards the stone platform in the sky. The purple-robed elder frowned slightly. Stop him. As soon as he finished speaking, several black shadows suddenly dashed down toward Yi Xian. Yi Xian was just about to attack when Mo-sia suddenly appeared in front of him. Mo-sia glanced at the black figures. You go, I'll deal with them. Yi Xian nodded slightly and stomped his right foot. He transformed into a sword light and shot towards the horizon. The black shadow warriors were about to stop Yi Xian, but at this moment, Mo-sia suddenly appeared in front of them and slapped his hands forward. Rumble. The space before him rippled like a wave. Those black figures that were about to chase after Yi Xian were all stopped. The leading black figure said solemnly, Deal with this person first. The moment he finished speaking, he charged towards Mo-sia. Mo-sia clenched his right hand. In the next moment, he stomped his right foot and charged straight over. At this moment, Yi Xian had already arrived before the stone platform. There were nearly 100 teleportation formations on the stone platform. The teleportation formations were shaking violently. Clearly, something was being teleported. Yi Xian wielded his sword and slashed forward. A ray of sword light flew out. Just as the ray of sword light was about to slash the teleportation formation, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared in front of the sword light and pointed a finger. Rumble. The sword light shattered. However, at this moment, his expression suddenly changed because numerous flying swords were already standing on the teleportation formations. Rumble. On the teleportation platforms, the teleportation formations began to crumble one after another. The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian. He suddenly disappeared. Rumble. Everywhere the middle-aged man passed, space trembled violently. It was an extremely shocking sight. Yi Xian held the Mo-ku sword with both hands. At this moment, countless strands of Mo-ku energy converged madly into his body. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian suddenly took a step forward and slashed down with his sword. Hiss. Space shattered as the sword passed. Rumble. Yi Xian's attack blasted the middle-aged man back. Yi Xian didn't pursue the middle-aged man, and he just pressed his fingers together and pointed towards the left instead. A few rays of light slashed towards the teleportation formations, and it didn't take long for the teleportation formations to be destroyed. The middle-aged man's expression became extremely unsightly when he witnessed this scene. Meanwhile, the violet-robed old man who was fighting Wei Yangtian had stopped as well. Retreat. Meanwhile, a voice resounded abruptly, and it didn't take long for the experts of the Foreign Territory and Sky River region to start retreating, and they retreated into the starry sky. Wei Yangtian was about to pursue them when Master Painter stopped her. Wei Yangtian frowned slightly. Why aren't you following up on your victory? Master Painter shook his head. Look down below. Wei Yangtian looked down. At this moment, the ground below was covered in corpses. There were experts from the Foreign Territory and Sky River region, and there were also experts from the Moke clan and Neverending Starfield. As for the remaining experts from the Moke clan and Neverending Starfield, most of them were heavily injured. They were utterly unable to continue fighting. Wei Yangtian fell silent. Master Painter spoke softly, recuperate for a while. Wei Yangtian spoke solemnly, they'll make a comeback. At that time, they'll be even stronger. Master Painter said, we can make preparations for that as well, right? Wei Yangtian fell silent. The violet-robed old man looked down at Wei Yangtian and the others. Wei Yangtian, it'll be the end of all of you when we return. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. On the other hand, the armies of the Foreign Territory and Sky River region retreated successively. The experts of the Moke clan and Neverending Starfield heaved sighs of relief when they saw the experts of Sky River region and the Foreign Territory retreat. They heaved huge sighs of relief. They weren't afraid of death, but they wanted to live. At that moment, Master Painter, Wei Yangtian, and the hunchbacked old man suddenly looked up at the starry sky. At that moment, a huge starry web enveloped the entire galaxy above Burial Great Wall. Seeing this, Wei Yangtian frowned slightly and was about to attack. Master Painter shook her head. Let them set up the array. The hunchbacked old man said softly, yes, unless we give up on Neverending Starfield, it's meaningless. After a moment of silence, Wei Yangtian turned to look at everyone present. Heal. As soon as she finished speaking, she vanished. Master Painter looked at the hunchbacked old man and said softly, Gentleman Mo, let's have a chat. The hunchbacked old man called Gentleman Mo hesitated for a moment before nodding. Let's chat. Master Painter nodded slightly. Very well. Soon, the experts of the Moke clan and Neverending Starfield returned to their respective places. However, the atmosphere had become slightly strange. Before this, they were all mortal enemies. But just now, they had joined forces against the enemy. Below, Mo.CS sat on the ground. Beside him were Zhuaqing, Earth Fiend, and the evil Qilin. By now, they were all severely injured. Mo.CS seemed to have thought of something and suddenly looked around. Where's Yi Xian? Zhuaqing looked around. He was just here. Why? Mo.CS said softly, Moke sword, saying that, he looked at Zhuaqing. Will he not return it? Zhuaqing hesitated for a moment and then said, as the most outstanding genius of Neverending Starfield, he should return it. Mo.CS said softly, probably. In the void, the purple-robed old man was expressionless. Beside him were the Sky River Starfield's Heavenly Venerate and the Foreign Divine Sorcerer. At that moment, except for the purple-robed old man, the rest of the people had ugly expressions. They had suffered a crushing defeat. This time, they had been completely confident of winning, but things had turned out this way. The Heavenly Venerate said softly, we underestimated them. Yen Xing nodded. Indeed. They had always treated the Moke clan and Neverending Starfield seriously. That was why they had only appeared after the Neverending Starfield and Moke clan had fought to the death. But they had not expected that after the battle, their combat power would still be so strong. At that moment, the Heavenly Venerate looked at the purple-robed old man. Brother Gu Yen, if we want to obtain Neverending Starfield, we must take care of Neverending Sky, Master Painter, and the ancestral patriarch of Moke clan. Saying that, He paused and then said, besides that, Yi Xian and Mo Xia are also extremely monstrous. If they grow up, we must take them seriously. The purple-robed old man called Gu Lian stopped and looked at the token in his hand. After a moment, he said softly, the higher-ups have given the order to summon the experts from the surrounding starfields. We will attack in 2 days. Prepare your people. The heavenly venerate frowned slightly. 2 days. Why the rush? The purple-robed old man said calmly, are we going to let them rest and recuperate? The heavenly venerate was silent. The purple-robed old man said, the spirit chi is drying up, and there are fewer and fewer starfields that can survive. If we do not take over Never-Ending Starfield, the Sky River Starfield and the foreign domain will completely dry up in a few decades and become dead starfields. The heavenly venerate said in a low voice, if the price is too high. Gu Lian interrupted the heavenly venerate. Price? Don't we have to pay a price to survive? We only want the treasure on Yi Xian. The rest is yours. Yanxing suddenly said, this Yi Xian's background might not be simple. According to our investigation, there seems to be a mysterious expert behind him. Gu Lian slowly closed his eyes. No matter how strong the expert is, he is useless in front of our planet master. P.S. I read the comments yesterday. Most of you want to read the Earth's chapters. Chapter 483. Burial Sky Great Wall, inside the stone house. As soon as Yi Xian returned to the stone house, he threw the moke sword into the prison pagoda. In an instant, he slumped to the ground. Weakness. That was how he felt at the moment. When he held the moke sword, he did not feel this way. Not only that, but his body was full of power. Temptation. The temptation of the moke sword was too great. Because of this, he hurriedly threw the sword into the prison pagoda. He did not want to be enslaved by the sword. Although that feeling was really good. But he wanted to control the sword himself, not be enslaved by it. Not far from Yi Xian, Baldi and the war army were there. Seeing Yi Xian like a pile of mud, the war army said in a low voice, Brother Yi, are you okay? Yi Xian shook his head slightly. I won't die yet. The war army said softly, that's good. Saying that, he seemed to have thought of something and his expression became somewhat complicated. I never thought that we would join forces with the Moke clan. Baldi also said, I didn't expect it, but if we don't join forces, everyone will die. Saying that, he looked at Yi Xian. Brother Yi, what do you think? Yi Xian was silent for a moment and then said, the Moke clan and we are all trying to survive. Baldi said in a low voice, but many of our brothers died in their hands. The war army nodded. When I think of this, I can't get over it. Yi Xian sat cross-legged and looked at the war army and Baldi. I won't let you forget the hatred, and the Moke clan definitely won't either. But now, we have a stronger enemy. Saying that, he turned to look outside the stone house and said softly, if we join forces, we might have a chance of survival. Hatred? He didn't know much about the enmity between the Moke clan and the never-ending star domain, but he knew that if they couldn't let go of this enmity, then both sides would die. In fact, he also knew that the war army and Baldi also knew this, but the two of them still couldn't let it go. Indeed, they were once mortal enemies, but now they had to work together. It was a little awkward. At this time, the war army suddenly said, however, compared to the Moke clan, I want to kill the Sky River sector and the foreign realm more. Baldi nodded. Me too. Yi Xian smiled and said, hurry up and heal your injuries. War army and Baldi nodded and began to heal their wounds. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground and began to frantically absorb the purple origin crystals. At the same time, his mind submerged into his body. Inside the prison pagoda, the sword of Mo Ku was wandering aimlessly. Soon, it arrived at the second floor. On the second floor, Shaoling, who was watering the spirit fruits, suddenly stopped and turned to look at the sword of Mo Ku. The sword of Mo Ku transformed into a sword beam and pierced a spirit fruit, Soon, the spirit fruit was swallowed by it. Little Ling flared up with rage when she witnessed this scene, and she swiftly slapped her palm towards the sword of Moke. The sword of Moke didn't give Xiao Ling any face and slashed at Xiao Ling. Seeing this, Yi Xian's expression changed and he was about to attack. At this time, on the top of the pagoda, the sword in the middle suddenly shook violently. The next moment, a sword beam appeared on the second floor. Boom! The sword of Moke was instantly sent flying. Outside, Yi Xian was stunned. The sword at the top of the pagoda had attacked. On the second floor, Xiao Ling held the sword and madly chased after the sword of Moke. At first, the sword of Moke didn't give up and fought back. But soon, it began to flee, because when it clashed with the sword in Xiao Ling's hand, it cracked. If Xiao Ling had used just a little more strength, it would have shattered. Run! The sword of Moke fled madly in the prison pagoda while Xiao Ling chased after it. But she was too slow and couldn't catch up to the sword of Moke. However, Xiao Ling had no intention of giving up. She held the sword and madly chased after the sword of Moke. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. He collected his thoughts and focused on healing. About 2 hours later, Yi Xian got up and left the stone house. He walked to the side of the city wall. Below the wall, some people were cleaning up the battlefield. There were many corpses. The smell of blood was everywhere. At this moment, a woman walked to Yi Xian's side. It was the painter. The painter looked at the corpses below and said softly, "What do you think?" Yi Xian was silent for a moment and then said, "The world is cruel." The painter looked at Yi Xian. "What else?" Yi Xian said softly, "War is cruel." The painter looked at the corpses below. "It is cruel. In this chaotic world, human life is always so worthless." Yi Xian looked at the painter. "What are you trying to say, senior?" The painter looked straight at Yi Xian. "Stop the war." Yi Xian shook his head. "It's difficult." The painter said softly, "It is difficult. All these years, I've been dealing with the Moke clan and the never-ending Starfield, but it's useless." Yi Xian said, "In my opinion, only great strength can stop the war." The painter looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. "Senior is very strong. Very strong. But what if Senior is 10 times or 100 times stronger than you are now? At that time, Senior can stop the war with a single word." The painter smiled. "Your words are not without reason. Indeed, I can kill many people and even save many, but I can't stop this person's greed and evil." As she spoke, she looked up at the horizon. At this moment, the horizon was covered by an enormous net of stars. The painter said softly, "They won't let you go." Yi Xian said, "I know." The painter said, "When the war begins, never-ending, and I will definitely be delayed. At that time, how will you protect yourself?" Yi Xian fell silent. The painter looked at Yi Xian. "You have 2 choices now. 1. Hand over that treasure and divert this disaster away. 2. Flee." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "There's nothing I can do." The painter asked, "Why?" Yi Xian said, "First, it's not that I don't want to hand over this treasure, but this treasure is connected to my mind. Unless it leaves voluntarily, I can't do anything to it. Nothing." As he said, this prison pagoda was not something he could control. At least, he couldn't remove it. Also, the second-floor god had once told him that the prison pagoda followed him because of the plain-dressed woman. In short, he was very aggrieved. The painter glanced at Yi Xian. "Since you can't hand over the treasure, why don't you flee?" Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "Can I flee?" The painter said softly, "That's true. You are their primary target. No matter where you flee, they won't let you go." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "Yes. Anyone can flee, but I can't. If I stay here and follow you, I might have a chance of survival. Saying this, he paused and said, "If you are afraid that I will implicate you, I can leave." The painter smiled. "Why would we? If you leave, they will still not let the never-ending star domain go. If you stay here, you will be of great help to us, won't you?" Yi Xian smiled faintly and looked up at the horizon. The painter said, "I have to go somewhere else. You stay here and help Mr. Bai, help him persuade Wei Yang. She is straightforward and hot-tempered. She will easily do something extreme." Yi Xian nodded. "Okay." The painter turned and left. At that moment, the painter suddenly turned to look at Yi Xian. "Can I go inside?" Yi Xian was stunned. "Inside?" The painter knew about the prison pagoda? The painter smiled and said, "Your body has its own space, right?" Yi Xian nodded. "Forgive me for being blunt, but you'd better not go in." The painter asked, "Why?" Yi Xian hesitated and said, "It's dangerous." He knew that the painter was very powerful, far more powerful than he imagined. However, his intuition told him that the fifth floor was even more powerful. Most importantly, if the painter entered and fought with the fifth floor, he would be the unlucky one. The painter thought and said, "After this is over, if we are all alive, I would like to see it. Is that okay?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Sure." The painter smiled faintly and turned to leave. On the city wall, Yi Xian turned and looked far away. At the end was the Moke clan. Sword. This Moke sword, Yi Xian thought and said, "I will definitely return this sword. I am busy now. I will return it in the future." With that, he turned and left. Moke clan, in a hall. The hunchbacked elder looked at Mo Xia. "You lent the sword to Yi Xian?" Mo Xia nodded. The hunchbacked elder was silent for a moment and said, "Will he return it?" Mo Xia hesitated and said, "As the most monstrous genius of never-ending Starfield, I believe in his character." The hunchbacked elder said softly, "According to my investigation, in this guy's eyes, character is not worth much." Mo Xia. Chapter 484. After Mo Xia left the hall, he went to the top of a mountain and sat cross-legged on the ground. He slowly closed his eyes and placed his hands on his legs. At that moment, his mind was filled with images of the previous battle. After that battle, he had also discovered many of his shortcomings. Apart from that, he had also learned many things. In particular, he had benefited greatly from the battle with Yi Xian. In the following time, the people of the Moke clan and the never-ending star field were healing and recuperating. Because everyone knew that the foreign land and Sky River star field would make a comeback. And when the experts of the foreign land and Sky River star field made a comeback, it would be the day of the final battle. Inside the stone house, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. In front of him was the Moke sword. After this sword had offended Xiao Linger, it had been chased by Xiao Linger. Seeing that Xiao Linger was still angry, Yi Xian had brought it out. The Moke sword. Looking at the sword in front of him, Yi Xian fell silent. The Moke force. He had experienced this kind of power before. It was very powerful, and it felt so good. However, this power had always wanted to enslave him. This was a double-edged sword. At that moment, Little Soul's voice sounded in Yi Xian's mind. "Young master, this sword is not simple." Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "How is it not simple?" Little Soul said, "This sword has its own source of power, and it seems to be endless. This kind of sword is extremely rare. In addition, the pair of eyes on the sword is a little strange." Yi Xian asked, "Strange? What do you mean?" Little Soul said, "I don't know, but it gives me a strange feeling. This sword should also be at the creation realm, and it should be at the Khanate creation realm." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Even creation realm artifacts are divided into innate and acquired?" "Yes, the realm of creation is divided into 3 types. The first is the acquired realm of creation, which is man-made and has limited power. The second is the innate realm, which is a treasure of the realm of creation. It is not man-made, or rather, it is there in the first place, but in the later stages, it is man-made. For example, I absorbed the souls of the underworld race for tens of thousands of years and used them to condense my own soul. Finally, it was the body that the old master created for me. Yi Xian nodded. Understood. The same goes for the Moke sword, right? More or less, little soul said. Yi Xian asked again, what about the third one? It's man-made, little soul said in a low voice. Yi Xian was stunned. Little soul explained, some man-made creation realm treasures are even more powerful than creation realm treasures of connate existences. When a person reaches a certain level, they can indeed go against the heavens. Yi Xian looked at the Moke sword in front of him. He had to say that both this sword and the soul-suppressing sword were somewhat heaven-defying. The biggest problem was that this sword was somewhat different from Little Soul's. Little Soul took the initiative to recognize him as its master, but this sword had no intention of recognizing him as its master. Not only did it not want to recognize him as its master, but it wanted to enslave him. It was a very thoughtful sword. A moment later, Yi Xian put away the Moke sword and left the stone house. Yi Xian came to the valley where the Moke clan was. As soon as he arrived, a young man appeared in front of him. It was Zhuo Qing. Zhuo Qing glanced at Yi Xian and smiled. Brother Yi, is there something you need? Yi Xian nodded. I want to see him. Zhuo Qing naturally knew who Yi Xian was talking about and immediately nodded. Come with me. Soon, Yi Xian followed Zhuo Qing to the top of a mountain. Seeing Yi Xian, Mo Xia, who was originally meditating, got up and walked in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled and opened his right hand. The Moke sword appeared in his hand. Then, he handed the sword to Mo Xia. Mo Xia looked at Yi Xian. Brother Yi, Yi Xian smiled. Returning it to its rightful owner. He, Yi Xian, was not a bandit. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. He would never take something that belonged to him, especially when it was lent to him by someone else. Shameless, there must be a bottom line. Mo Xia reached out and held the sword. After a while, he handed it to Yi Xian. Yi Xian was puzzled. This? Mo Xia said, this sword will only be buried in the Moke clan. It can only shine in your hands. Yi Xian said in a low voice, this is a creation realm treasure. Mo Xia smiled. I know. Then, he looked at Yi Xian. Next, the Moke clan will join forces with the never-ending Starfield. Whether we can survive is another matter. Then, he turned to look at the sky and said softly, the grudge between the Moke clan and the never-ending Starfield. Then, he shook his head. If we can't survive this time, all this will be meaningless. Yi Xian nodded. Brother Mo, there is something I don't understand. Why do the foreign region and the Sky River Starfield want to destroy the Moke clan and the never-ending Starfield? To fight for territory? Mo Xia said softly, something like that. Then, he looked at the sky. There are many starfields nearby. The Sky River Starfield, the foreign region, the never-ending Starfield, the Spirit Void Starfield. Now, the only ones that can survive are the Spirit Void Starfield and the never-ending Starfield. The Spirit Void Starfield is the furthest from us. There are spatial turbulences around it. There is no way to set up a teleportation array there. Also, the Spirit Void Star Palace is powerful, so the never-ending Starfield is the best choice for everyone. Yi Xian said in a low voice, can't survive? The spirit chi is disappearing? Mo Xia nodded. Every world has spirit chi. For example, the never-ending Starfield has origin chi. However, this spirit chi is not endless. There will be a day when it is completely gone. Then, he turned to look at the burial wall and said softly, the spirit chi in the never-ending Starfield can last for about 100 years. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. Then, He hesitated and said, the Moke clan can live together with the never-ending starfield if they come to the never-ending starfield, right? Moxia smiled. When the Moke clan first came here, we wanted to conquer the never-ending starfield and monopolize it. But the factions in the never-ending starfield will never allow any outside faction to encroach on their interests. So, there is no room for negotiation. Do you understand? Yi Xian was silent. Then, Moxia looked at Yi Xian. If I call the shots for the Moke clan, I can lead the Moke clan to live in this starfield and everyone can live in peace. Do you agree? Yi Xian smiled bitterly. You can call the shots for the Moke clan, but I can't call the shots for the never-ending starfield. Moxia thought for a moment and said, fine. We can talk about this after this matter is over. Come with me. I'll take you somewhere. Then, he turned and walked into the distance. Sui Qing gestured for him to follow. Yi Xian nodded slightly and followed. Soon, Moxia brought Yi Xian to an underground cave. After walking for about an hour, Moxia finally stopped. At this moment, not far from the three of them, there was a stone platform. On the stone platform, a middle-aged man sat cross-legged. The middle-aged man's hair fell over his shoulders, and his hands were placed on his knees. There was not the slightest bit of aura coming from him. Yi Xian asked, this is? Moxia said softly, the ancestor of the Moke clan was a swordsman. He was also the only swordsman in the Moke clan. After him, no one else has been able to control the Moke sword. Yi Xian said, why did you bring me here? Moxia led Yi Xian to the middle-aged man. Yi Xian saw an ancient book in front of the middle-aged man. On the top of the book were 4 words, Moke sword. Moxia said softly, this sword technique should not be buried here. Moreover, there is a way to control the Moke force. It should be very useful to you. As he spoke, he picked up the ancient book and handed it to Yi Xian. This is for you. Yi Xian said in a low voice, I still don't understand. Moxia smiled. You don't understand why I gave you the sword, and this sword scroll. This chapter is not over. Please continue. Technique? Yi Xian nodded. Moxia said softly, I am also doing this for the Moke clan. Yi Xian looked at Moxia. Moxia smiled. I only have one request. One day, you will be in charge of the never-ending star field. We will sit down and talk. A talk that doesn't involve fighting and no one dies. Is that okay? Yi Xian thought about it and nodded. Okay. Moxia nodded slightly and turned to leave. Sui Qing glanced at Yi Xian and also turned to leave. Yi Xian looked at the ancient book in his hand and fell silent. From Moxia's words, he realized that Moxia did not want war either. Indeed, if they continued fighting, more people would die. Of course, this was all in the future. Now, whether it was the Moke clan or the never-ending star field, everyone had to face the foreign land and Sky River star field. Whether they could survive was a problem. Yi Xian collected his thoughts, turned around, and left with the scroll. On the mountain peak, as he watched Yi Xian disappear into the distance, the hunchbacked elder behind Moxia asked softly, is it worth it? Moxia smiled. Patriarch, the Moke sword will only be gathering dust in our hands, won't it? The hunchbacked elder said, but it's still ours. Moxia said softly, we have a common enemy now. The hunchbacked elder asked, and then? Moxia said, we might die. The hunchbacked elder said, we might also survive. Moxia fell silent. The hunchbacked elder continued, if he survives, he might be your enemy. Without him, the never-ending star field's younger generation will have no match for you. When that time comes, you will be the strongest of the younger generation in this star field. Moxia smiled. Patriarch, what's the point of being the strongest? The hunchbacked old man looked at Moxia. Moxia smiled and said, if we both survive, and I fight him again in the end, I will do everything in my power to kill him. With that, he turned and left. The hunchbacked elder looked at Wuxia's back. Gradually, a smile appeared on his face. How can the Mok clan not be happy to have such a son? With that, he disappeared. Yi Xian returned to the great wall of burial sky. In the stone house, he looked at the Mok sword in his hand. As he stared, Yi Xian's expression gradually turned solemn. The Mok sword. The Mok sword gathered the Mok power in the Mok sword and unleashed its strongest attack. Backlash. The Mok clan's ancestor did not suffer any backlash, but if he used it, he would. And it would be a huge backlash, because the backlash would be controlled by the Mok power and turn him into a sword slave. Before the Mok clan's ancestor, there were dozens of swordsmen who decided to be enslaved by the Mok power. In the stone house, Yi Xian thought for a moment and brought the Mok sword to the prison tower. The Mok sword began to tremble as if it was afraid of something. Yi Xian brought the Mok sword to the top of the tower. At that moment, the Mok sword began to tremble violently. Yi Xian glanced at the two swords in front of him and said, "Mok sword, I don't mean anything else. I just want to tell you. I have nothing to do with the two swords in front of you. Really, if you want to bite me, they won't kill you." The Mok sword. P.S. Brothers, is there anyone who knows how to make videos or draw pictures? I hope to make a short video of the sword domain with pictures of the characters. It's not for free, and I'll pay for it. I hope to find someone to draw a few pictures of Tianming, the Unfettered One, Yang Yi, Snowy, Arya, Xiao, and a few short videos. Are there any big shots who are skilled in such things? If there are, then contact me. I really don't want to be a freeloader. I'll pay as much as you want. Of course, don't screw me over. I'm not that rich. End of this chapter. Chapter 485. At the top of the tower, the Mok sword in Yi Xian's hand trembled violently. Yi Xian looked at the Mok sword and smiled. Don't be nervous. Really, I mean no harm. The Mok sword was speechless. Yi Xian looked at the two swords in front of him and said softly, "Don't worry, it won't hurt me." Then, he looked at the Mok sword. Am I right? The Mok sword was speechless. Yi Xian turned to look at the two swords and smiled. Don't worry, I'll definitely be fine. After saying that, he walked down the tower with the Mok sword. Yi Xian returned to the first level with the Mok sword. He looked at the Mok sword in front of him. Don't worry, I won't enslave you. You and I are equal. However, the condition is that you don't harm me. Otherwise, I hope we can cooperate well. After saying that, he gripped the Mok sword tightly and began to chant something. Mok mental cultivation method. This was a mental cultivation method created by the senior of the Mok clan. It could stabilize one's mind. About 15 minutes later, Yi Xian suddenly gripped the Mok sword. Soon, a powerful force gathered in his body. Mok power. When this force entered Yi Xian's body, he immediately became excited. Power. Once again, he felt that kind of tempting power, as if it was endless. However, Yi Xian quickly calmed down. Power. This power was very tempting, but it was not his power. This was the power of the Mok sword. It did not belong to him. He could borrow this power, but he could not rely on it. Yi Xian guarded his mind and continued to absorb that power. Soon, more and more Mok power entered his body, swell. This was what Yi Xian felt at that moment. He felt like his body was full of power. It was as if he could kill everything in a second. After a while, Yi Xian began to guide that power. During this process, he could feel that the Mok sword did not cause any trouble. However, he still did not dare to be careless. He was still very careful and made the soul-suppressing sword pay attention to the Mok sword at all times. If the Mok sword dared to mess around, he wouldn't show any mercy. Just like that, time passed bit by bit. The power on Yi Xian's body grew stronger and stronger. Roughly 2 hours later, Yi Xian's eyes suddenly opened, revealing 2 blood-red pupils. Eye of Moke. Yi Xian gripped his sword tightly in his right hand. In his eyes, there was a flash of sword light. At this moment, he finally realized that the source of the sword of Moke's power came from these eyes. Apart from the pupils, there was nothing special about the sword of Moke. However, the combination of the two and the mastery of the swordsman made the sword extremely powerful. The death of Moke. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Very quickly, he felt a series of scenes. A gloomy world, with dead people everywhere, and a pair of eyes looking down on everything in the dark. No, it should be said that it was devouring all the killing intent and resentment, murder. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly emanated a powerful murderous aura. At the same time, his eyes turned blood red. Murderous intent. Yi Xian felt that his mind was about to be controlled by this murderous intent. Sensing this, Yi Xian's expression changed drastically. He quickly said angrily, "Don't cause trouble for me." However, the murderous intent grew stronger and stronger. At the same time, the aura emanating from his body also grew stronger. Yi Xian was shocked because he realized that he was about to lose control of this power. Without any hesitation, he quickly sent the pair of eyes back into the Moke sword. Inside the Moke sword. Boom! Yi Xian's entire body instantly collapsed to the ground like a deflated balloon. On the ground, Yi Xian panted heavily. His face was covered in cold sweat. In that instant, he actually wanted to kill someone. He wanted to kill anyone. Only when he thought of Yi Ling did that murderous intent weaken a little. However, his murderous intent was still strong. Thinking of this, Yi Xian suddenly sat up. His expression was somewhat fierce. At this moment, Soul's voice suddenly sounded in his mind. "Young master, this is not its fault." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Soul said in a low voice, "Young master, this is the nature of the Moke sword. If you want to control it, there are only 2 ways. The first is to obey it and be controlled by it. The second is to suppress it and make it under your control." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Under my control?" Soul said, "Yes, young master can control it." Yi Xian asked, "How do I control it?" Soul said, "If you are not controlled by it, and your mind is clear, you can control it. Because it is not deliberately targeting young master. Otherwise, with young master's current strength, it is absolutely impossible to suppress it. But I don't understand, why does it not target you, young master?" Yi Xian's expression was a little strange. Soon, he said seriously, "It must have seen my extraordinary talent, so it wants to follow me." Soul said, That's impossible, right?" Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. "Soul, what do you mean? What do you mean by impossible?" Soul giggled and did not say anything. Yi Xian, a moment later, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground, looking at the Moke sword in front of him. There was only one way to conquer this sword, and that was not to be controlled by it. Fear still lingered in his heart from the scene just now. That murderous intent was too strong. He was afraid that he would be controlled by the murderous intent, and then do something that he would regret. Fear. Yi Xian's expression suddenly changed. He was actually afraid. He had never had this kind of thought before, and he was afraid of a sword. How could he be afraid? And he was afraid of a sword. Gradually, Yi Xian's expression became a little ugly. If he was afraid of a sword, how could he cultivate the sword? Thinking of this, Yi Xian suddenly gripped the Moke sword with both hands, and the next moment, endless Moke power gathered towards him. As more and more Moke power entered his body, Yi Xian's body gradually began to tremble, and that murderous intent appeared again. Not only that, but a pair of blood-red eyes appeared in his eye sockets. As this pair of blood-red eyes appeared, Yi Xian found that the murderous intent had begun to devour his mind. Yi Xian gritted his teeth. At this moment, he no longer retreated, but faced this murderous intent head-on. The more he retreated, the more afraid he became. Yi Xian began to accept this murderous intent, but he still kept his mind clear. Leave a trace of clarity, and maintain his original heart. That was what he needed to do now. Time passed bit by bit, and the murderous intent around Yi Xian grew stronger. Not only that, but his expression also became more ferocious, like a demon. Beside him, Xiaoling looked at Yi Xian with a little fear. She hugged the god on the second floor next to her tightly, and pointed a small claw at Yi Xian, not knowing what to say. The god on the second floor looked at Yi Xian without saying anything. Just like that, about 4 hours later, Yi Xian's aura grew stronger, so strong that it had surpassed the Saint Realm. However, at this moment, the murderous intent around Yi Xian was also terrifying. Xiaoling looked at the god on the second floor, and the god said softly, "If he can endure it, he will be reborn. If he can't, then he can't blame anyone else. This is the path he chose." As she said that, she looked at Yi Xian in the distance. Just like that, time passed bit by bit. Yi Xian's aura was still growing stronger, but at the same time, the murderous intent was also growing stronger. This was not Yi Xian's murderous intent, but the murderous intent of Mo Ku's puppet. Therefore, this murderous intent was not under Yi Xian's control. On the contrary, Yi Xian might even be controlled by this murderous intent. Now, it all depended on who was stronger, him or this murderous intent. The god on the second floor glanced at the fifth floor, and then looked at Yi Xian with a trace of worry in her eyes. Another 2 hours passed. At this time, Yi Xian's body began to tremble violently, as if he was having an epileptic fit. Seeing this scene, the god on the second floor frowned. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly stood up and walked towards her and Xiaoling. Xiaoling hurriedly ran behind the god on the second floor. She covered her eyes with both hands, not daring to look at Yi Xian. The god on the second floor looked at Yi Xian, not saying a word. Yi Xian walked in front of the god on the second floor and pointed his sword at her. The god on the second floor was expressionless. All of a sudden, Yi Xian thrust forward. The god on the second floor did not dodge, but the sword stopped half an inch away from the god's eyebrows. Yi Xian suddenly grinned. Just kidding. With that, he withdrew his sword. At this time, the god on the second floor suddenly pressed forward. The next moment, Yi Xian felt a sharp pain in his abdomen, and then his whole body flew out. The god on the second floor walked towards Yi Xian. Kidding? I was also kidding. With that, her speed suddenly increased. Bang! Yi Xian flew out again. A moment later, Yi Xian sat on the ground with his back against the wall. The Mo Ku sword was in front of him, and the god on the second floor was not far away. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. He had brought this upon himself. The god on the second floor walked in front of Yi Xian. Have you subdued it? Yi Xian nodded slightly. But, it's not very stable yet. The god on the second floor said, that power, after all, is not yours, understand? Yi Xian nodded. I understand. I will not rely too much on this power. With that, he looked at the god on the second floor. What is the attitude of the fifth floor? The god on the second floor was silent. Yi Xian said in a low voice, must he kill me? The god on the second floor shook his head. He wants the pagoda, and the pagoda is now at its weakest. Plus, the woman in the plain dress is not here, so now is the best time for him to take the pagoda. And if he wants the pagoda, you must die. Yi Xian hesitated, then said, there is no way to turn an enemy into a friend? The god on the second floor said calmly, why don't you go talk to him? Yi Xian shook his head. Beg him not to kill me? The god on the second floor was silent. Yi Xian said softly, how can I really control this pagoda? The god on the second floor looked at Yi Xian. Maybe never. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Why? The god on the second floor glanced around. This pagoda is 100 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times more terrible than you think. It is still asleep and has not shown its ferocious side. With that, she looked at Yi Xian. Jian Zizai gave up this pagoda because she knew that she could not control this pagoda. Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then said, "Why did she choose me? Just because I am excellent? Just because I am different? Just because I..." The god on the second floor suddenly punched out. Bang! Yi Xian flew out directly. The god on the second floor glanced at the flying Yi Xian and shook her head. "I can't stand it." Chapter 486. After a while, Yi Xian leaned against the wall. At this moment, he was speechless. What kind of temper did this second floor almighty have? Attacking at the slightest provocation was simply inhumane. The second floor almighty looked at Yi Xian. "You have to understand that this prison pagoda might not truly submit to you." Yi Xian looked at the second floor almighty. The second floor almighty said softly, "The reason why it recognizes you as its master is most likely because of the plain-dressed woman. The plain-dressed woman can suppress these existences here. Moreover, it should be afraid of the plain-dressed woman. Submitting to you will allow it to gain the approval and support of the plain-dressed woman." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "This feeling is very uncomfortable." The second floor almighty looked at Yi Xian. "What's uncomfortable about it?" Yi Xian shook his head. "All along, I thought it chose me because it liked me." The second floor almighty said, "Actually, this is also a possibility." As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. "These are not important. What is important is that you have to understand one thing. It is stronger than you, much stronger." Yi Xian nodded. "I understand. However, I have no choice, right?" The second floor almighty was silent. Did Yi Xian have a choice? In fact, he had no choice. Choose not to take the prison pagoda? The problem was that the prison pagoda had found him, not that he had chosen the prison pagoda. The second floor almighty shook her head. At this moment, she suddenly felt a little lost. Because in the unseen world, many things seem to have been predestined. Yi Xian suddenly stood up and smiled. "Actually, I should thank it." The second floor almighty looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. "Because it has brought me many benefits. For example, you, the Space Dao Law, the Grand Dao Law, and Miss Jian. And you all have helped me. And that sword that left. I can't only see the disadvantages, can I?" The second floor almighty nodded. "It's good that you have such a mentality." Yi Xian looked up at the fifth floor. As for the fifth floor, as he spoke, he looked at the almighty on the second floor. "If I didn't have the help of the plain-dressed girl, I wouldn't have any chance of winning." The almighty on the second floor didn't say anything. Yi Xian asked again, "Why isn't the fifth floor making a move yet?" The great god on the second floor said, "It's because of that sword. But soon, the other party will make a move." At this point, she looked at Yi Xian. "I can feel that it won't take more than 5 days." 5 days. Yi Xian nodded slightly. "I understand." With that, he left the world prison pagoda. After Yi Xian left, the almighty came to the 4th floor. She walked to the entrance to the 5th floor. "Can't we talk?" After a moment of silence, the sound of footsteps suddenly rang out from the 5th floor. The face of the god on the 2nd floor changed drastically. After a few breaths, blood slowly flowed from the corner of the 2nd floor god's mouth. At the same time, a chuckle sounded from the 5th floor. "Talk? What right does an ant have to talk to me?" As the voice fell, the footsteps began to move towards the entrance. At this moment, above the top of the pagoda, a sword suddenly flew down. The next moment, the sword directly entered the 5th floor. Buzz! The sound of a sword rang out from the 5th floor. A moment later, the sword left the 5th floor and returned to the top of the pagoda. In the 5th floor, a voice suddenly sounded. The sword is not bad, but I don't know how the owner of the sword is. The Almighty on the 2nd floor looked at the 5th floor. You should be able to see it. The Almighty on the 5th floor laughed. The sword has left this pagoda. I think it's going to find its owner. I hope its owner isn't too weak. Otherwise, when I come out, it will be a lot less fun. The face of the Almighty on the 2nd floor darkened. The 5th floor was actually waiting for the owner of the sword. Was this arrogance? Arrogance? Or confidence? At this moment, she thought of Jian Zizi. She was. This woman was the best fighter in the Protoss. And she had personally experienced the strength of this woman. However, the other party could only be locked up on the 4th floor. The strength of the 5th floor was definitely above Jian Zizi. After a moment, the Almighty on the 2nd floor turned and left. After Yi Xian left the World Prison Pagoda, he came to the mountain range where he used to cultivate. In the dense forest, Yi Xian walked slowly. In the dense forest, a light breeze blew, a little chilly. From Qingqing until now, he had experienced a lot and seen a lot. Now, he was no longer naive and only wanted to live a peaceful life. In this kind of world, a peaceful life was undoubtedly courting death. Because one day, the whole world might suddenly be destroyed. Yi Xian looked up at the sky. At this moment, what he could see in the sky was a huge star net. The other world. The Sky River sector. The 5th floor. These people all wanted him dead. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Unknowingly, he had fallen into a desperate situation again. No, from Qingqing until now, his situation had never been good. Survival. Yi Xian continued to walk forward. He found that he could no longer think about swordsmanship or martial arts. What he needed to do now was to live well. If he died, what would happen to his sister? What would happen to his mother? At this thought, Yi Xian's expression gradually became somewhat sinister. Live. He had to live well. Yi Xian opened his right hand, and a sword appeared in his hand. Immortal Spirit Sword. Yi Xian held the sword and pointed it at the ground. Soon, 2 kinds of sword intent suddenly appeared around him. One black and one white, one good and one evil. Good. Evil. He had never particularly understood good and evil, because in the world, good and evil were often decided by the strong. The winner was king, and the loser was a bandit. The emperors of the world, as long as they were defeated, they were bandits. As long as they were victorious, no matter how evil they were, they could also become good. Good and evil were determined by one's fist. But was that really the case? Perhaps so, but in his opinion, good and evil were in the human heart. Good was good, and evil was evil. Good and evil were determined by one's heart, not by others. He protected his sister, protected his mother, fought for himself, and fought for the never-ending starfield. That was good. At this thought, the sword intent of kindness in front of Yi Xian suddenly transformed into a sword light and shot into the sky. In the void, the sword intent turned into sword light and circled continuously. On top of the Great Wall of Heaven Burial Wall, Wei Yang Tian looked up at the wisp of sword intent above the mountain range, deep in thought. Beside her was Mr. Bai. Mr. Bai said softly, "His sword intent?" Wei Yang Tian nodded. Mr. Bai thought for a moment, then said, "I underestimated him." Wei Yang Tian looked at the distant horizon, and in her mind, that scene from back then. That scene that she could not forget. In the dense forest, the sword intent in the sky transformed into a pure white sword and flew back to Yi Xian. It floated quietly in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian was silent. Kindness. The kindness of the woman in the plain dress could change mountains and rivers with a single thought. Because of her powerful strength, she could determine the life and death of all things with a single thought. The kindness and evil of the woman in the plain dress transcended herself and the great Tao. He was far from being able to do that, so there was no need for him to learn from the woman in the plain dress. His kindness was to live well, protect his sister, protect his mother, and protect everything he wanted to protect. It was that simple. At this thought, Yi Xian reached out with his left hand and grasped the pure white sword. The pure white sword trembled slightly and suddenly disappeared. But in the next moment, the sword reappeared 100 zhang away. It did not travel through space, but wherever his kindness went, the sword would go. The sword of kindness was born from the heart and condensed from thoughts. It was not restricted by space and was not trapped by heaven and earth. What was evil? Was killing evil? What about killing those who deserved to be killed? Whether it was good or evil, it was determined by one's heart. He would not kill those who should not be killed, but he would kill those who deserved to be killed, and he would kill them ruthlessly. Good and evil were determined, and the heart and mind were connected. 2 swords suddenly flew out in front of Yi Xian. They were swords condensed from the sword of kindness and evil. Different from the sword of qi, they were not restricted by space and could appear anywhere he wanted. Compared to the sword of qi, they were even more mysterious. The 2 swords represented his way of the sword. At this moment, the 2 swords suddenly returned to him. Yi Xian took out the moke sword. In the next moment, the 2 swords transformed into 1 black and 100 white sword rays that entered the moke sword. Yi Xian held the moke sword in his hand. Endless moke power entered his body. About an hour later, Yi Xian's lips curled into a smile. After the good and evil sword intents were suppressed, the killing intent could no longer affect him. Not only that, but even the moke power could be suppressed by his sword intent. The sword of kindness and evil could suppress the killing intent. It was not over yet. Yi Xian sat down cross-legged and waved his right hand. 9 saint-grade swords appeared in front of him. In the next moment, he picked up a sword and stabbed it into his abdomen. He began to madly absorb the energy of the swords. Cultivate. Become stronger. This was his current goal. As one sword after another was devoured by Yi Xian, the aura emanating from his body quickly grew stronger and stronger. The painter came to a mountain. This mountain towered in the clouds. Above the clouds, cranes flew by from time to time. It was like a fairyland. The painter walked to a large hall. At this moment, a white-haired woman appeared in front of him. The white-haired woman looked at the painter. "What are you doing here?" The painter smiled. "Senior sister, The white-haired woman shook her head. "From the moment you left the Xian gate, we were no longer senior sister and junior sister." The painter smiled. "Senior sister, you have known me since I was young. You know that I have no desire for the position of Xian gate sect master. Making me the sect master is the same as taking my life." The white-haired woman looked at the painter. "Do you not want to be the sect master, or do you not want to compete with me?" The painter said softly, "In my heart, you will always be that senior sister who took care of me since I was young. No matter what, it is not as important as you." The white-haired woman looked at the painter. After a moment, her eyes became somewhat complicated. "You are the most outstanding genius of our Xian gate. If you become the sect master, Xian gate will definitely prosper." The painter shook his head. "I am too lazy. I do not like these trivial matters. If I do it, Xian gate will only be a mess. With senior sister here, Xian gate will become better. In fact, Xian gate will also be better than before." The white-haired woman said softly, "Are you praising me?" The painter smiled. "Senior sister, this time, I came to ask for your help." The white-haired woman asked, "Never-ending star field?" The painter nodded. The white-haired woman was silent. The painter asked, "What is it?" The white-haired woman opened her palm. A sword of order was in her hand. Seeing this sword of order, the painter's face instantly darkened. The white-haired woman looked up at the horizon and said softly, 9 star fields, 12 saint-rank mercenary groups, 26 mutant sorcerers, 72 saint-rank knights. Who can stop them?" As she spoke, she looked at the painter. "Leave never-ending star field." The painter was silent. P.S. My hope in this lifetime is if Sword Domain can be made into an animation, that would be great. However, it is also difficult. I heard that making an animation is even more expensive than a television series. Chapter 487. Leave the never-ending starfield. The painter fell silent. In front of the painter, the white-haired woman said softly, "The never-ending starfield can't stop them." The painter smiled, "But we can't just give up like this, right?" The white-haired woman looked at the painter. "You should know that if you stay, you will only be sending yourself to death." The painter said softly, "Perhaps." With that, she turned and left. The white-haired woman suddenly said, "Master." The painter didn't stop. She continued walking forward. She couldn't speak anymore. Because if the mystic gate joined in, it would only be a meaningless sacrifice. At this moment, a woman appeared in front of the painter. Her clothes were as white as snow, untainted by a speck of dust. The white-haired woman was stunned. "Little Un?" The woman in front of her was Enlancio. The painter sized up Enlancio and said with a smile, "Senior sister, I heard that a very good genius appeared in our mystic gate. Is it her?" The white-haired woman nodded, "Yes." The painter smiled, not bad at all." Enlancio looked straight at the painter. "I will go with you." The painter was stunned. The white-haired woman frowned. "Little Un?" Enlancio looked at the white-haired woman and said softly, "Sect master, he and I are friends." The white-haired woman said in a low voice, "Do you know what he is facing now?" Enlancio said, "Then all the more I should go." The white-haired woman stared at Enlancio. "You are not allowed." Enlancio shook her head. "You can't stop me." The white-haired woman was about to attack when the painter suddenly said, "Senior sister, let her go with me." The white-haired woman looked at the painter and frowned. "Are you crazy?" The painter smiled. "Senior sister, she should experience such a great battle. I know what senior sister is worried about. I will guarantee senior sister that she will be safe. Is that all right?" The white-haired woman glanced at Enlancio. "You must go." Enlancio nodded. The white-haired woman sighed softly and waved her right hand. A seal that seemed to be cast from ice appeared in front of Enlancio. Enlancio was stunned, puzzled. The painter smiled. "The mystic ice seal, my mystic gate's most precious treasure, accept it." Enlancio accepted the mystic ice seal and bowed to the white-haired woman. The white-haired woman looked at the two of them. "Come back safely." The artist nodded. "I will do my best." As soon as she finished speaking, she brought Enlancio along and vanished on the spot. After the two of them left, an old man appeared behind the white-haired woman, and the old man said in a low voice, "Sect master, you shouldn't have let that girl leave." The white-haired woman shook her head. "Shaoan is very stubborn. We can't change her mind." The old man said, "She is our most outstanding genius." The white-haired woman said softly, "That's why we can't keep them in captivity." As she spoke, she looked up at the horizon. The star enforcers. How can the never-ending star domain stop them? A man sat cross-legged on the peak of a mountain. His eyes were slightly closed, as if he had entered a meditative state. This person was Wuxia. Not far behind Wuxia was the hunchbacked old man. When the sky darkened, Wuxia, who was sitting cross-legged, suddenly stood up. In the next moment, a powerful aura swept out from his body, but very quickly, this aura disappeared. The hunchbacked elder asked, "You broke through?" Wuxia nodded slightly. At that moment, he had reached the creation realm from the sage realm. In terms of realm, it could be said that he was among the top experts on this continent. Wuxia looked up at the starry sky. In the starry sky, the star web was still there. The hunchbacked elder suddenly said, "No matter what, you must live. You are the hope." Wuxia shook his head. "The Moke clan has no deserters. I can be the last to die, but I will never be the last to live." As he spoke, he looked at the hunchbacked elder. "Patriarch, take me to the ancestors." The hunchbacked elder hesitated, then nodded. Okay. Soon, the two of them disappeared. In the mountain range of the Great Wall of Burial Sky, Yi Xian had already devoured all the swords. At that moment, he was very calm, and the aura emitted from his body was also very calm. Not far to the right of Yi Xian, Lian Wanli leaned against a large tree with her arms crossed. She looked at Yi Xian, and beside her was Shaoling. This little guy would often come out for a stroll now. After an unknown period of time, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes. In his eyes, there was a pair of blood-red pupils. The moke eye. Now, he had already used this pair of pupils as his own eyes. For the time being, it was not bad. Not far away, Lian Wanli suddenly said, "What realm?" Yi Xian looked at Lian Wanli. Ethereal opening. Lian Wanli frowned slightly. Why? Yi Xian smiled. I cultivate in adversity. I walk through every realm again. Lian Wanli walked in front of Yi Xian. Cultivate in adversity? Yi Xian nodded, then explained to Lian Wanli. After a while, Lian Wanli asked curiously, how does it feel to cultivate like this? Yi Xian said softly, walking through it again, there will be many new discoveries. Lian Wanli smiled. Fight? Yi Xian smiled. What do you think after the incident? Lian Wanli said, what if we both die? Yi Xian said softly, then it's a draw. Lian Wanli thought about it and said, sure. Yi Xian looked up at the sky. The star web was still there. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian suddenly smiled. I don't like to sit around and wait for death. As he spoke, he looked at Lian Wanli. Do something? The corners of Lian Wanli's mouth curled up slightly. That's exactly what I want. Yi Xian suddenly transformed into a ray of light that shot into the sky, and Lian Wanli followed closely behind. It didn't take long for Yi Xian to arrive before the star web. Meanwhile, an old man appeared in front of Yi Xian. This person was the divine mage, Yansheng. Yansheng stared at Yi Xian and was about to speak when his expression changed drastically. In the next moment, he pressed his hands together, and a powerful flame swept out from his body. At the same time, he forcefully dodged to the side. An instant later, Yansheng appeared 300 m to the right. However, his arms were gone. Moreover, they were falling slowly to the ground where he stood just now. Yansheng stared fixedly at Yi Xian with a trace of fear in his eyes. In that instant just now, he'd instinctively sensed danger. However, he hadn't seen how Yi Xian had attacked. Moreover, he hadn't seen how the sword had vanished as well. That sword was like a ghost. If he'd been just a little slower, even just a little, then he would have lost his life. Yansheng gazed at Yi Xian with extreme terror in his heart. When did Yi Xian's strength become so terrifying? Yi Xian gazed at Yansheng. The latter's expression changed, and he moved 300 m back once more. Yi Xian said in his heart, what a pity. Just now, he'd intended to take Yansheng by surprise. Unfortunately, Yansheng was too strong and reacted too quickly. Even if he'd suddenly attacked, Yansheng was actually able to react in time. Fortunately, chopping off Yansheng's arms was still a gain. As Yi Xian walked towards Yansheng, two red-robed old men suddenly appeared behind the latter. Two divine wizards. Yi Xian stopped and said, don't be like this. Let's fight one-on-one. Yansheng gazed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, I have to say that you've indeed given the old man a huge surprise. However, you don't know that the more monstrous you are, the more we won't let you off. Yi Xian shook his head. Would you let me off if I wasn't a monstrous genius? Don't talk nonsense. As he spoke, he pointed his sword at the old man, one-on-one. If you're a man, let's fight one-on-one. Yansheng sneered, one-on-one? You're so naive. Kill him. As soon as he finished speaking, the two behind him formed seals with their hands and started to chant incantations. Right at this moment, two swords suddenly appeared before them. One of the swords was white and the other black, and they appeared without any warning. The expressions of the two divine wizards changed drastically. At this moment, they didn't even have time to chant any incantations, and they turned around and flashed. Meanwhile, Yi Xian and Lian Wanli suddenly vanished on the spot. Nearby, Yanxing's expression changed drastically because Yi Xian was coming for him. Without any hesitation, Yanxing stomped his right foot lightly. Hiss! Yanxing vanished on the spot, and when he reappeared, he was already behind the star web. However, at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly turned around and slashed at the other divine wizard. The divine wizard formed hand seals with both hands and was just about to chant an incantation when two swords silently appeared in front of him again and slashed down at him. The divine wizard's expression changed drastically, and he didn't dare to continue chanting an incantation. He immediately flashed and retreated. However, the two swords were like maggots on a bone, and they chased after him closely. They were even faster than him, and he didn't have time to chant an incantation. At this moment, the divine wizard was horrified. The main reason was that Yi Xian's swords were too fast, and he would be pierced through the chest if he was the slightest bit careless. Therefore, he couldn't use any secret techniques at all. With this retreat, the divine wizard retreated into the star web. However, as soon as he retreated into the star web, a miserable scream resounded from outside the star web. Yanxing and the divine wizard turned to look outside, and they saw a bloody head slowly falling from the sky. Yanxing and the divine wizard's expressions instantly turned extremely ugly when they saw this scene. At this moment, they realized that Yi Xian's real target wasn't them, but the other divine wizard that was being held back by Lian Wanli. Yi Xian and Lian Wanli had actually killed a divine wizard in an instant. In the distance, beside Yi Xian, Lian Wanli glanced at the falling head below. If they can't use their secret techniques, so weak. Yi Xian nodded slightly. At this moment, he also realized that although these divine wizards were very powerful, they also had a fatal weakness, and that was that they couldn't get close to them. To be more precise, as long as they weren't allowed to cast spells, they were as weak as chickens. However, the prerequisite was that the flying swords had to be fast enough to prevent these people from using their secret techniques. Once these people used their secret techniques, it would really be a little too destructive. Yi Xian walked in front of the star web and looked at Yanxing and the others. "Didn't you want that treasure? Come out." Yanxing looked at Yi Xian. "You're very arrogant." Yi Xian grinned. "I'm arrogant, come out and hit me." Lian Wanli, Yanxing stared at Yi Xian. "Come in." Yi Xian said, "Come out." Yanxing said calmly, "Aren't you very powerful? Come in." Yi Xian shook his head with a smile and turned to leave. However, when he turned around, he suddenly coughed violently. Not only that, but he also bent his waist, but he quickly straightened it. Seeing this scene, Yanxing frowned slightly. The next moment, he seemed to think of something and hurriedly said, "Stop him, he's suffering from a backlash." Behind Yanxing, the divine wizard hurriedly rushed out. However, as soon as he came out of the star web, two swords silently appeared behind him. At the same time, an azure dragon saber appeared in front of him. The god mage's eyes were wide open, filled with sorrow and despair. He knew that he was finished. Because he realized that Yi Xian had long planned this. This time, not only was he caught off guard, but he was also tricked by Yi Xian. An instant later. Qi! The divine wizard who had just come out was directly beheaded. Yanxing, who was about to come out, froze in place. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly clutched his stomach. "Ouch, I'm suffering from a backlash. I'm suffering from a backlash, come and hit me." Yanxing. Chapter 488. Lian Wanli glanced at Yi Xian and shook her head. You're asking for a beating. Yi Xian laughed, then turned to look at Yan Sheng, whose expression was extremely ugly. The strongest of the foreign domain? Just a so-so. Ha. After saying that, he turned into a sword light and disappeared into the horizon. Lian Wanli glanced at Yan Sheng and said apologetically, "Sorry, he's a straightforward person and likes to speak the truth. Please don't mind him." After saying that, she turned and floated away. Ah! Yan Sheng suddenly roared, his whole body trembling with anger. At this moment, his expression suddenly changed. The next moment, he suddenly detonated his body. Boom! Yan Sheng's body collapsed, but his soul had already appeared hundreds of feet away. And there stood a person where Yan Sheng had been standing. This person was Yi Xian, who had previously left. Yi Xian looked up at Yan Sheng, who was not far away. Yan Sheng looked at Yi Xian in horror. "You, how could you pass through the star web without a sound? You." At this moment, the sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly turned into the soul-suppressing sword. The next moment, he held the sword and pointed at Yan Sheng. Soul separation. As soon as he said that, Yan Sheng in the distance was instantly horrified. He frantically retreated, but in the process of retreating, his soul actually disintegrated bit by bit. Yan Sheng looked at Yi Xian in horror. "You," Yi Xian waved his sword, and Yan Sheng's soul immediately turned into a black light and was absorbed by Little Soul. After a moment, Little Soul's excited voice sounded. "What a powerful soul! Young lord, I want more." Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. "You want more? What do you think this is? A cabbage?" Little Soul said excitedly, "Young lord, this is a great supplement. After I devour it, I can quickly recover." Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "If there's a chance, I'll definitely let you absorb more." Little Soul hurriedly said, "Thank you, young lord. I'm willing to climb a mountain of swords and go into a sea of flames for young lord, even if I die 10,000 times." Yi Xian's expression froze. After a long time, he shook his head, "So you're like this, Little Soul." Xiao Hun, right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly looked up and saw a middle-aged man standing not far away. Celestial Venerable. The painter who had fought against endless heaven. Without any hesitation, Yi Xian used the Space Dao Law to retreat out of Star Web. The Empyrean looked at Yi Xian, "You really surprise me." Needless to say, Yi Xian killing 3 divine mages by himself was a bit too exaggerated. Of course, this was an exaggeration. If Yan Sheng hadn't underestimated Yi Xian in the beginning and hadn't guarded against Yi Xian wouldn't have been able to cut off Yan Sheng's arms in an instant. With 3 divine wizards working together, Yi Xian wouldn't be able to resist them at all. However, these 3 people were defeated by Yi Xian one by one. Yi Xian took one look at the Empyrean, then turned to leave. However, to his surprise, the Empyrean had no intention of attacking at all. Not long after Yi Xian left, a woman appeared where Yi Xian had been standing. The newcomer was none other than Endless Sky. The Empyrean looked at Endless Heaven. "Palace Master Endless, you don't know who you're fighting." Endless Heaven said calmly, "And then?" The Empyrean smiled slightly, then turned to leave. Endless Heaven glanced at the starry sky behind Star Web. In the depths of the starry sky, she could vaguely see teleportation arrays. Teleportation arrays. She knew very well what this meant. A moment later, Endless Heaven turned to leave. Burial Sky Great Wall. This chapter is not over. Please continue to the next page. In a stone house, the Moke clan and the never-ending Starfield powerhouses were all there. Yi Xian and Mo Xia were there as well. Inside the stone house, Wei Yang Tian said softly, "I've already received news that there are 9 star fields, 12 saint-rank mercenary groups, 26 special sorcerers, 72 saint-rank knights, and 19 saint-rank demonic beasts participating in the encirclement." The hunchbacked old man's face gradually darkened when he heard that. Yi Xian suddenly asked, "Saint-rank mercenary groups? Endless heaven looked at Yi Xian. In the starry sky, there are some forces formed by people that specialize in killing and robbing people. A mercenary group that can reach the saint rank means that they have at least one creation realm powerhouse, and the rest are at least at the saint rank. As for the mutant sorcerers, they belong to the same sect as the god sorcerers. However, these mutant sorcerers like to play dirty, and their methods are slightly different. Speaking up to this point, she paused for a moment and continued, these saint knights should have been trained by the keeper of order. Every single one of them is a peak saint knight. Moreover, their combat strength is extremely strong, the kind that doesn't need to be exaggerated. Hearing that, everyone suddenly quieted down. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stood up and said softly, do we have any other choice? Everyone looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled and said, for us, we have no other choice. So, what we can do is to fight to the death. As for the others, we are going to die anyway, but before we die, we must drag down as many scapegoats as possible. Everyone looked at Yi Xian and did not speak. Yi Xian said again, there is no other choice. Isn't that right? Endless heaven nodded slightly. For us, there is no other choice now. If we win this battle, everyone will live, but if we die. At this point, she looked at Yi Xian. Then as she said, drag more scapegoats with us. The hunchbacked old man nodded. Fight. Fight to the last person. Fight. In the entire stone house, no one said anything about surrendering or negotiating. Because this was simply impossible. Yi Xian left the stone house. At this moment, Mo Xia followed him out. The two of them walked down the Great Wall. Mo Xia said, you can already control that sword? Yi Xian nodded. Mo Xia smiled lightly. As expected, it is still suitable for you. Yi Xian said softly, thank you. Mo Xia looked up at the starry sky. Do you think we will win? Yi Xian smiled and said, no. Mo Xia looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said softly, the more afraid we are of losing, the more likely we will lose. The more afraid we are of dying, the more likely we will die. Mo Xia smiled slightly. Indeed. Put yourself in a desperate situation and you will be reborn. Yi Xian stopped and said softly, put yourself in a desperate situation and you will be reborn. Mo Xia glanced at Yi Xian. I hope everyone can survive. After saying this, he turned around and left. Staying where he was, Yi Xian kept walking forward after a moment of silence. Live. Who didn't want to live? Yi Xian also wanted to live. But at this moment, he could feel how powerful the enemy was. Not only the enemy outside, but also the 5th floor of the prison pagoda. Prison pagoda. This pagoda brought him an opportunity, but at the same time, it was also a great disaster. As the plain-dressed woman said, possessing this prison pagoda was a blessing and a curse to him. The plain-dressed woman. At this moment, Yi Xian thought of the plain-dressed woman. That woman was so strong that she was unreasonable. The appointment in the clouds. When the plain-dressed woman disappeared for the last time, she made a promise with him to meet in the clouds. This chapter is not finished, please continue. Actually, he also wanted to see her. Was there still a chance? Yi Xian looked up at the horizon. He was at a loss. Time passed bit by bit. At the end of the night, a smear of white appeared on the horizon. Soon, a red sun appeared on the horizon. At this moment, the star web covering the Great Wall suddenly disappeared. A man appeared in the sky above the Great Wall. The Celestial Venerable. The Celestial Venerable looked down. Anyone from the never-ending Starfield or the Moke clan will be spared if they surrender. Spared if they surrender. With the help of mystic energy, this sentence quickly spread throughout the Great Wall. At this moment, Wei Yang Tian appeared in front of the Celestial Venerable. Wei Yang Tian looked at the Celestial Venerable. Don't waste your breath. The Celestial Venerable sneered. Wei Yang Tian, since you want to die, we will fulfill your wish. As soon as he finished speaking, 72 powerhouses on black flaming horses suddenly swooped down. The people on these flaming horses were all sage powerhouses. Sage knights. 72 people swooped down. Their might was like that of a magnificent army with thousands of horses and men. Everyone felt a strong sense of oppression. Wei Yang Tian suddenly said, Wei Yang guards. As soon as he finished speaking, 16 Wei Yang guards, led by a Gui, suddenly appeared behind him. At this moment, the hunchbacked elder suddenly said, General Mo Ku. As soon as he finished speaking, 9 General Mo Ku appeared behind the hunchbacked elder. Wei Yang Tian said softly, Kill. With a sickle in hand, a Gui led the 16 Wei Yang guards into the sky. The 9 General Mo Ku of the Mok clan also charged out. 25 people against 72 people. In terms of momentum, the never-ending Starfield and the Mok clan did not lose to the 72 sage knights at all. The celestial venerable glanced at the Wei Yang guards and General Mo Ku. He had to admit that these people were very strong. However, could 20 people really fight against 72 people? As soon as the battle began, the Wei Yang guards and General Mo Ku were suppressed. The Wei Yang guards and General Mo Ku were very strong because they were experts carefully nurtured by the never-ending Starfield and the Mok clan. However, these sage knights were not weak either, especially when it came to numbers. Therefore, as soon as the two sides clashed, the Wei Yang guards and General Mo Ku of the Mok clan were suppressed. Seeing this, the celestial venerable smiled. He looked at Wei Yang Tian. Attack. As soon as he said that, a group of people suddenly charged down from the sky. There were not many people, only about 40 to 50. These people all charged down in groups. They were obviously the Sage Realm Mercenary Corps. And these people were all sages. At this moment, Sage Realm experts were walking around like dogs. Although there were so many sages this time, it did not mean that sages were cabbages. On the contrary, sages were still very rare in this starfield. There were so many of them here because the Keeper of Order had basically gathered all the sages here. If they were scattered, each starfield would at most have 10 to 20 sages. Below, Wei Yang Tian looked at Mr. Bai. Mr. Bai nodded slightly. Soon, he led Li Zhangfeng and the others into the sky, heading straight for the mercenary corps. The current head of the Mok clan, Mo Kuchi, also led a few desolate clan experts and charged out. In the sky, the celestial venerable looked down and saw Mo Xia, Sua Qing, and the others. However, he did not see Yi Xian. He frowned and scanned the area below. He still did not see Yi Xian. As if remembering something, the celestial venerable's expression changed. Yi Xian is gone. He's going to set us up. P.S. My gums have been inflamed recently. It's painful. End of this chapter. Chapter 489. As soon as the heavenly venerable finished speaking, 2 rays of sword light slashed through the mercenary group a few thousand meters away. It was extremely fast. 2 of the Saint Realm experts didn't even have time to react before their heads flew into the air. At practically the exact same moment, another 2 heads flew into the air over 30 meters away. The heavenly exalt's face fell when he saw this, and he was about to make a move. However, never-ending heaven suddenly made a move. Boom! An explosion resounded, and the heavenly venerable instantly retreated 300 meters. By the time he stopped, more than a dozen of the mercenaries had died. All of them had been instantly killed. Moreover, more were dying incessantly. The heavenly venerable turned to look at the starry sky. Attack! As soon as he finished speaking, an afterimage shot down from the sky. In the dark below, Yi Xian, who was about to launch an attack, frowned slightly. Then he stepped back. As soon as he stepped back, the space where he had been suddenly exploded. Yi Xian looked in front of him. A man in black had suddenly appeared there, and the man held a dagger in his hand. He could sense that the man in black was looking at him. The man in black was able to notice him. Right at this moment, the man in black suddenly disappeared. Yi Xian was just about to attack when Mo Xie suddenly appeared in front of him. In the next moment, Mo Xie punched forward. Rumble. The man in black returned to where he was before. Mo Xie said, "Continue. I'll deal with him." As soon as he finished speaking, he stomped his right foot lightly. Boom! Space trembled slightly, and he vanished on the spot. The man in black held the dagger tightly in his right hand, and his body gradually turned illusory. In the next moment, numerous afterimages flashed towards Mo Xie from all directions. Seeing this scene, Mo Xie narrowed his eyes. In the next moment, he suddenly slammed his palm in front of him. Rumble. The space within 100 meters suddenly shook violently. Immediately after, a powerful force spread outwards with Mo Xie at the center. At the same time, a black figure was forced back by this force. It was the man in black. The man in black suddenly stomped his right foot and used the power of space to stop himself. However, he just stopped when two swords appeared soundlessly. Hiss. The swords pierced through the man's head. Blood splattered everywhere. Mo Xie turned her head and looked around, but she didn't see Yi Xian. But right at this moment, a series of screams rang out incessantly from the mercenary group on the right. Instant kill. The group of mercenaries fighting with Mr. Bai and the others could be said to be frightened out of their wits at this moment because they did not discover who was secretly attacking them. The two flying swords were really too elusive. There was nowhere to hide. Soon, the group of mercenaries retreated as they fought. Not only did they have to face Mr. Bai and the other powerhouses, but they also had to guard against the people who attacked them from the shadows. The people who attacked them from the shadows took up too much of their energy. Many people already had thoughts of retreating. At this time, the heavenly venerate fighting never-ending heavens suddenly looked up into the depths of the starry sky and roared, "What are you waiting for?" In the starry sky, a purple-robed old man looked down. The purple-robed old man was expressionless, and behind him was a dense black army. After a short moment, the purple-robed old man said softly, "Kill." With that, countless soldiers swooped down from the starry sky. Among this army there were human powerhouses, demonic beasts, and some oceanic species great demons. Their numbers were several times that of the Moke clan and never-ending star field. As he charged down, the sky darkened in an instant. In the sky below, Mo Xie looked up at the dense black army and said softly, "All members of the Moke clan, listen up. Fight to the last man." With that, he directly leaped onto the evil Qilin's back, and the next moment, he rode the evil Qilin and soared into the sky. Behind him were countless Moke clan powerhouses. Fight! Countless angry roars soared into the sky, shaking the horizon. On the other side, Shui Bai held a long spear in his hand and looked up at the horizon. The next moment, he pointed his spear at the horizon. Fight! With that, Shui Bai and Zhou Xingxing soared into the sky, and behind them, countless never-ending star field powerhouses followed closely. Fight! No one had the slightest bit of fear. They could only fight. In the starry sky, the purple-robed old man looked down. Among the mercenary groups, powerhouses were still being killed instantly. The purple-robed old man turned to look beside him. "Can we restrain him?" With that, 3 old men appeared beside the purple-robed old man. The 3 old men all wore gray robes and held black staffs in their hands. Divergent sorcerers. The 3 of them looked down. After a moment, the leading divergent sorcerer said softly, "Give us some time." The purple-robed old man nodded. Soon, the 3 divergent sorcerers began chanting incantations. Gradually, the space around them began to tremble. At the same time, 3 mysterious forces followed the space and spread downwards. The purple-robed old man looked down, his eyes searching for one person. That was the painter. But he hadn't seen this painter yet. This painter was as terrifying as Wei Yang Tian. After a moment of silence, the purple-robed old man suddenly said, "Attack." With that, 6 powerhouses appeared behind him. These 6 people were very different from humans. They were much taller than humans. Demon Lord. The 6 of them were all Creation Realm powerhouses, and they were all at the peak of the Creation Realm. In the next moment, the 6 of them charged downwards. Below, Wei Yang Tian suddenly looked up into the sky. When she saw the 6 of them, she frowned slightly. Who would stop them? At this moment, a woman appeared before the 6 of them. Painter. The painter stared coldly at the 6 of them. The 6 of them charged towards the painter. 6 against 1. In the starry sky, the purple-robed old man relaxed when he saw the painter appear. It was fine as long as the painter appeared. He turned to look at the 3 divergent sorcerers. At this moment, the leading divergent sorcerer suddenly made a seal downwards. Void seal, appear. As soon as the voice fell, the space below suddenly trembled violently. Yi Xian, who was in the dark, suddenly had a drastic change of expression. He hurriedly retreated, and the space he was retreating to suddenly ignited. After a moment, Yi Xian stopped. At this moment, in the space above his head, there was a black flame floating. That flame was right above his head. At this moment, although he was still in the space, that flame was following him. The current him was no different from not hiding at all. Yi Xian raised his head. In the sky, the 3 divergent sorcerers were watching him. Beside the 3 divergent sorcerers, the purple-robed old man suddenly said, "Kill him." The leading divergent sorcerer took out a black mirror and began to silently chant, "Heaven and Earth Mysterious Technique, Universe Reconstruction, Seal." With that, he pointed his finger at Yi Xian. Below, the space around Yi Xian suddenly froze and began to search layer by layer. Seeing this, the purple-robed old man's expression changed. "Don't use spatial techniques." As soon as he finished speaking, the space around Yi Xian went back to normal. Seeing this scene, the 3 of them immediately frowned. They looked at the purple-robed old man. The purple-robed old man said in a deep voice, "Spatial techniques are useless against this guy. Change to a secret technique." The leading old man nodded. He looked at Yi Xian and quickly made a gesture with both hands. In an instant, the space around Yi Xian began to heat up. In the starry sky, the divergent sorcerer formed a seal with both hands and silently chanted, "Heaven and Earth Mysterious Technique, for symbols Secret Technique, Absolute Blaze." As soon as he finished speaking, the space around Yi Xian suddenly ignited. Yi Xian slashed with his sword. Hiss! A ray of light flashed, but it was directly incinerated by the flames. At the same time, Yi Xian noticed that his body seemed to be on fire. Yi Xian frowned slightly. These geezers have some ability. He didn't dare be careless. The sword in his hand transformed into the sword of Moke. In the next moment, a powerful force converged towards his body like a tide. Moke energy. A short moment later, Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot with his sword in hand. Hiss! A ray of light flashed, and everywhere it passed, it tore through everything. Even the flames were torn apart. After charging out of the flames, Yi Xian didn't deal with the 3 divergent sorcerers. Because he knew that he couldn't get close to them at such a distance. Moreover, there was a purple-robed old man by their side. So, he was very clearly aware that he couldn't get close to the 3 divergent sorcerers. So, his objective right now was to help Ague and the others deal with the Saint Realm Knights. Because Ague and the others were being steadily pushed back. The expression of the old man changed when he saw Yi Xian charge towards the Saint Realm Knights. His figure shook, and he shot through space to arrive in front of Yi Xian. After that, he suddenly clawed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian instantly felt a powerful force shrouding him as soon as the palm touched him. This force was so oppressive that he could hardly breathe. Yi Xian naturally didn't dare act carelessly when facing the old man, and he immediately took his sword in both hands and slashed it forward. A single strike of his sword was enhanced by 2 types of sword intent. Bang! As the sword slashed down, Yi Xian was instantly sent flying. However, the purple-robed old man in front of him was also forced to retreat over 100 feet. The old man glanced at his right hand. At this moment, his right arm had split apart like a spiderweb. The old man's face fell, and there was a trace of seriousness in his eyes as he gazed at Yi Xian. "What sort of monstrous genius are you?" At this moment, he was extremely astounded because he hadn't expected that he would actually be injured by a junior. That attack from Yi Xian had almost destroyed his entire arm. But Yi Xian wasn't even at the Saint Realm. He was too monstrous. The old man's eyes gradually turned icy cold as he gazed at Yi Xian, and he didn't conceal his killing intent at all. In the distance, Yi Xian could feel the murderous intent of the purple-robed elder. He gripped the moke sword tightly in his right hand. Facing this purple-robed elder, he did not dare to be careless. One careless move could cost him his life. Right at this moment, the violet-robed old man suddenly vanished. In the distance, Yi Xian frowned slightly. In the next moment, he took a stride forward, and then he held his sword with both hands before he suddenly slashed down from above. Bang! As his sword slashed down, Yi Xian instantly felt a powerful force spread through his entire body, and then he was blasted flying. However, the purple-robed old man did not care about his arm that had been completely torn apart. He charged forward and punched Yi Xian, who was sent flying. If this punch landed, Yi Xian would definitely become a pile of mush. Chapter 490. Right when this fist was about to smash onto Yi Xian, a spear suddenly tore through the sky and arrived before him. Bang! The violet-robed old man retreated by over 30 m. The violet-robed old man raised his head to look over, and he saw a white-clothed woman that held a spear in her hand standing before Yi Xian. This person was precisely Enlanxiu. Enlanxiu held a spear in her hand as she just looked at the violet-robed old man without a trace of fear in her eyes. The violet-robed old man stared fixedly at Enlanxiu. "Who are you?" Enlanxiu didn't speak, and she just looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian wiped off the blood on the corners of his mouth. "What are you doing here?" Enlanxiu looked at Yi Xian. "Am I not welcome?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Of course I am." Enlanxiu was just about to say something when the violet-robed old man suddenly roared furiously. "Die for the old man." As soon as his voice resounded, he pressed his left hand forward. With this press, an enormous energy palm suddenly flashed out from space, and it shot straight towards Yi Xian and Enlanxiu. Enlanxiu's wrist spun, and her spear stabbed out. Hiss! This spear directly stabbed onto the enormous energy palm. However, the formidable force of the attack really did force Enlanxiu to retreat repeatedly. But right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly slashed his sword at the enormous energy palm. Bang! The enormous energy palm exploded into pieces. However, Yi Xian's expression changed instead because the violet-robed old man had already appeared in front of him. Yi Xian was just about to attack when Enlanxiu's voice suddenly resounded in his mind. Retreat! Yi Xian didn't hesitate to retreat, and he just retreated when a spear suddenly stabbed straight down towards the top of Yi Xian's head, and a strand of light flickered on the tip of the spear. The violet-robed old man's expression changed, and he didn't dare underestimate Yi Xian, and he smashed out with his left fist. Bang! Enlanxiu retreated over 30 m with her spear, but at practically the exact same moment, 2 flying swords appeared before the violet-robed old man and slashed straight at his throat. The violet-robed old man's pupils constricted slightly, and he hurriedly dodged backwards. However, he just stopped when Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of him. In the next moment, Yi Xian slashed down with his sword. Soul Fixation Sword. Moreover, at this moment, Yi Xian was holding the soul-suppressing sword in his hand. Facing this purple-robed elder, Yi Xian did not dare to use soul separation or soul fixation from a distance, because the other party was too strong, and he did not have the slightest confidence. Thus, he chose close combat. The purple-robed old man had nowhere to hide. At this moment, the violet-robed old man had obviously sensed the uniqueness of this strike of Yi Xian's, and his expression instantly changed drastically. At this moment, he was utterly unable to dodge because this strike of Yi Xian's was too ingenious and had grasped the perfect timing. So, he could only choose to take it head-on. There was no other choice. The purple-robed old man roared angrily and punched out with his left hand. This punch could be said to contain the power of his entire life. The space in front of him directly collapsed. Yi Xian's sword fell. Boom! Along with the sound of an explosion, Yi Xian was instantly sent flying. However, at the instant he was sent flying, his sword struck the purple-robed old man's arm. At this instant, the violet-robed old man was horrified. He didn't hesitate to detonate his body resolutely while his soul floated backwards. As he floated several thousand feet away. And Lanxiu was about to chase after them when the violet-robed elder suddenly roared, "Stop them!" For black-clothed men appeared in front of the purple-robed old man. And Lanxiu did not attack again. Instead, she turned around and returned to Yi Xian's side. Fresh blood flowed endlessly from the corners of Yi Xian's mouth. And Lanxiu lightly wiped the blood from the corner of Yi Xian's mouth, her expression gradually turning cold. Yi Xian stared into the distance. The purple-robed old man's soul was fading away, but a moment later, the purple-robed old man's soul began to fade. But after a short moment, the old man's soul returned to normal. He didn't die. Yi Xian's face sank. In the distance, the violet-robed old man raised his head to look at Yi Xian. At this moment, his eyes were filled with extreme fear. That sword strike from before had almost directly crushed him to death. If his soul wasn't sufficiently strong, he would have died already. The violet-robed old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian for a short moment, and then he turned around and returned to the starry sky. At this moment, he didn't dare fight Yi Xian and Lanxiu anymore. He was a soul body now, and Yi Xian's sword and sword techniques clearly countered soul bodies. If he were to continue attacking now, he would have a slim chance of survival. After returning to the starry sky, the violet-robed old man said furiously, "Attack! Everyone attack!" As soon as his voice resounded, countless experts swooped down from the boundless starry sky. Many, a dense expanse of darkness. At this moment, the enforcers of order attacked with all their might, and they didn't hold back in the slightest. Below, Yi Xian raised his head to look at the dense expanse of darkness in the starry sky. His brows were knit together tightly, and it was unknown what he was thinking. Beside him, Lanxiu said in a light voice, "Just do your best." Yi Xian nodded lightly, "Just do your best." As soon as he finished speaking, he charged into the sky with his sword in hand. And Lanxiu was behind Yi Xian. Yi Xian charged towards the group of saint-rank cavalrymen once more because Ague and the others were completely suppressed. If no one helped them, then Ague and the others would die. Along with the addition of Yi Xian and Lanxiu, Ague and the others instantly felt much more at ease. Especially since Yi Xian's flying sword was helping them from the shadows, and it could be said to be a great help. Even these saint-rank cavalrymen were unable to resist Yi Xian's flying sword. That flying sword was too swift. It was swift to the point even saint-rank experts couldn't dodge it. Moreover, Lanxiu's strength was extremely formidable as well, and she directly crushed saint-rank experts. Especially when Lanxiu and Yi Xian cooperated together, they could practically instantly annihilate any saint-rank expert. For a time, Ague and the others started to gradually gain the upper hand. In the starry sky, the purple-robed old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian and Lanxiu below. His gaze was like a sword, and it flickered with ghastly killing intent. Right at this moment, Yi Xian, who was killing, suddenly turned his head, and in the next moment, he directly vanished on the spot. Chi! A strand of sword light directly severed the head of an expert. And in front of this expert, a young man slowly fell from the sky. This person was War Army. At this moment, War Army only had one arm left. Yi Xian supported War Army. War Army's entire body was covered in scars, and his aura was growing weaker. When he saw Yi Xian, War Army grinned, and this grin instantly caused a copious amount of blood to gush out from his mouth. Yi Xian gently placed War Army on the ground. War Army looked up at the end of the horizon and softly said, "Brother Yi, I might have to leave first." Yi Xian shook his head, "There's still hope." With that said, he took out a pile of purple source crystals and placed them in War Army's arms. War Army gently shook his head, "The current me no longer has any combat strength. If I live, I will only be a burden to my brothers. To me, death is a kind of release." Yi Xian said angrily, "What the f***ck are you saying? What do you mean by you will only be a burden to your brothers if you live?" War Army softly said, "Brother Yi, let me die." Die. He naturally wanted to live, but at this moment, he was very clear that he would only be a burden to others if he lived. Because the current him no longer had any combat strength, and if these brothers around him came to protect him, they would be implicated by him. He wanted to live, but he didn't want to implicate these brothers around him even more. Yi Xian gently placing War Army on the ground, he held War Army's shoulders tightly with both hands. "Listen, live well, live for me." With that said, he suddenly turned around and slashed down with his sword. Chi. In front of him, an expert was directly cut in half by his sword, but soon, more and more experts rushed towards him and War Army. Looking at those experts rushing over, Yi Xian's expression gradually became ferocious. When those people rushed in front of him, he suddenly waved his hands. Buzz. Two swords suddenly rang out, and then two swords suddenly flew out. For a moment, in front of Yi Xian, dozens of people's heads almost moved at the same time. But the next moment, more people rushed over. War Army looked at Yi Xian with a somewhat complicated expression. "Brother Yi," Yi Xian suddenly said angrily, "Shut up, hurry up and heal your wounds." With that said, he held his sword and slashed diagonally. A sword aura shot out, and in an instant, dozens of people on the right were directly killed. However, more and more experts appeared in the sky, and at that moment, whether it was the Moke clan or the Never-Ending Starfield, more and more people were dying. Never-Ending Starfield's Moke clan was completely suppressed. At that moment, in the void in the sky, Moke clan's MOCS suddenly turned around. Not far away, Zhua Qing's chest was pierced by a sword, and one of the foreign experts slashed at Zhua Qing's head. Zhua Qing slowly closed his eyes. He was already exhausted. This was not a one-on-one fight, he had killed at least hundreds of experts by himself, and at that moment, he was really exhausted. Seeing Zhua Qing's situation, MOC's expression changed drastically. He was about to help, but at that moment, dozens of experts directly surrounded him. MOC's expression instantly became ferocious. He pointed a finger at his chest, and a powerful aura swept out from his body. Rumble. The surrounding experts all retreated from the impact. MOC looked at Zhua Qing's position. Zhua Qing's head did not fly off, but was slowly dragged down by a sword. MOC turned his head to the right, where Yi Xian was. At that moment, Yi Xian was facing off against almost 100 experts by himself. MOC looked at the falling Zhua Qing. Zhua Qing glanced at MOC and smiled slightly. "I'll go first." With that, he looked at the countless experts rushing towards him. Moke clan. Fight to the death. With that, he placed his palm on his abdomen. MOC's expression changed drastically. No. He rushed towards Zhua Qing, but a powerful force suddenly exploded from Zhua Qing's body. Almost in an instant, almost 100 experts around him were directly turned into ashes. Seeing this scene, MOC was stunned. On the other side, Yi Xian was also stunned. After a moment of silence, MOC suddenly looked up at the sky. The next moment, he clenched his fists and smashed them in front of him. Rumble. With MOC as the center, the space within a few hundred meters suddenly shook violently and cracked. Powerful dark energy surged out from the surroundings. In an instant, countless screams rang out from the surroundings. Mo Xie raised his head and roared, "All members of the Mok clan, listen to my order. Kill. At all costs." With that, he rushed into the sky. Wherever he passed, heads flew out one after another. On the other side, Yi Xian turned his head to look at War Army. War Army's right hand slowly clenched. Yi Xian said angrily, "Don't do stupid things." War Army said softly, "I don't want to drag you down." With that, he slammed his palm towards his abdomen. At the same time, a powerful force was gathering in his abdomen. Chapter 491. Self-destruct. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's expression changed drastically, and he suddenly slashed with his sword. Chi! A wave of sword gleams surged out, and the dozen people in front of Yi Xian were directly killed by this sword gleam. Meanwhile, Yi Xian turned and rushed toward the War Army. The War Army looked at Yi Xian in front of him and grinned. "Brother, take care." With that said, he slowly closed his eyes. At that moment, a hand suddenly pressed down on the War Army's shoulder. In an instant, the powerful force in the War Army's body was directly suppressed. The War Army opened his eyes. In front of him stood a black-robed man, and behind this black-robed man were 9 men in black robes. These 9 people's faces could not be seen clearly. The War Army was a little puzzled. "You are?" The reason why he was puzzled was because he had never seen these people before. The black-robed man did not answer the War Army. He turned to look at Yi Xian, and at that moment, Yi Xian was already in front of him. Yi Xian looked at the black-robed man. "You are?" The black-robed man said, "Young Master Yi, we are here to help you. As for anything else, we can't tell you for the time being." Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then said, "Thank you very much." The black-robed man looked up at the void in the sky and said softly, "Young Master Yi, are you willing to leave with us?" "Leave?" Yi Xian frowned slightly. "Leave?" The black-robed man nodded. "Young Master Yi, to be honest, this time, the Keeper of Order is serious. With the current strength of the Mok clan and the never-ending Star Sector, it is impossible to stop them." As he said that, he looked at Yi Xian. "You will only die in vain if you stay here." "Die?" Yi Xian turned to look at the sky, which was filled with a dense army. It could be said that the defeat of the never-ending Starfield and the Mok clan was only a matter of time. Yi Xian said softly, "I, Yi Xian, appreciate everyone's good intentions." The black-robed man said solemnly, "Young Master Yi, you have no chance of winning." Yi Xian said, "It's precisely because there's no chance of winning that I can't leave." As he spoke, he looked towards the sky and said in a light voice, "If others don't betray me, I won't betray them." The black-robed man sighed softly. In fact, he had already expected this. Yi Xian looked at the black-robed men and said, "Everyone, I don't know who you are, but please don't get involved in this matter." The black-robed man smiled and said, "We came here to help." With that, he waved his right hand. Behind the black-robed man, 9 people suddenly soared into the sky. 9 Sage Peak experts. Moreover, they weren't ordinary Sage Peak experts. They were very strong. Yi Xian looked at the black-robed man and the black-robed man smiled and said, "I know young Master Yi has questions. If we win, I will tell young Master Yi. If we lose, everything will be meaningless." Yi Xian nodded and said, "No matter what, thank you." The black-robed man said, "Let's talk later." With that, he turned and soared into the sky, directly rushing towards a rebirth realm expert. Yi Xian turned and looked at the War Army. War Army was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly grabbed him and brought him into the Great Wall of Burial Skies. Yi Xian placed the War Army on the ground and said, "Heal well." If we all die before you recover, you can self-destruct. If we don't die, then come out and help." With that, he turned and disappeared not far away. In the same place, the war army was silent for a moment before he began to devour purple origin crystals. Heal. What he needed to do now was to quickly heal. Outside the great wall of burial skies, Yi Xian stood in the sky. At this moment, there were screams everywhere in the starry sky. People were dying at every moment. Although the black-robed man and the others had joined in, it was not very useful. At this time, a certain part of space suddenly exploded. A woman walked out. This person was precisely Master Painter. When he saw the painter, the purple-robed old man's face instantly darkened. The painter looked up at the starry sky and finally, her gaze landed on the purple-robed old man. The latter's expression instantly changed. At this moment, the painter suddenly disappeared, and when she reappeared, she was already in the starry sky. The purple-robed old man was shocked. "Stop her." Dozens of experts directly rushed towards the painter. However, in less than a breath's time, these dozens of people had their heads removed. At the same time, the painter had already appeared in front of the purple-robed old man. Just as the painter was about to attack, an afterimage suddenly swept towards her. The painter frowned and raised her hand to press down. Boom! A wave of energy suddenly erupted from the painter's palm, but it was quickly extinguished. The painter was forced back nearly 100 steps. And at this time, in front of the purple-robed old man stood a middle-aged man. This middle-aged man wore a black overcoat and had a sheathed saber at his waist. The painter looked at the middle-aged man. The latter's right hand grasped the saber hilt. After a moment of silence, he suddenly drew the saber. Chi! A saber light erupted from the sheath, as dazzling as the sun. In the distance, the painter's jade-like hand gently pressed forward. The space in front of her palm began to rapidly condense. At this time, the saber light arrived. Bang! The space in front of the painter began to violently tremble. Then, cracks began to appear. In less than a breath of time, the space for 10,000 feet around the painter had cracked into a spiderweb. The painter's right hand suddenly clenched into a fist. She lightly pressed forward, "Break." As her words fell, bang! The space in front of the painter began to collapse inch by inch. A formidable strength spread out like a tsunami towards the blade-wielding man. Across from the painter, the blade-wielding man was expressionless. His eyes were closed, his right hand gripping the saber hilt. After a moment of silence, he stepped forward, his right hand drawing the saber and slashing down. His movements were completed in a single breath. Chi! A wisp of saber aura tore through the air. Chi! Wherever the saber aura passed, it tore through everything. Even the painter's strength was torn apart. The space in front of the two was like a piece of cloth, while the saber aura was like a sharp scissor. Soon, the saber aura tore through the space and arrived in front of the painter. The painter's hands came together. This closed in on the saber aura. After a moment of silence, the painter suddenly pressed down. The saber aura instantly disappeared. However, at this moment, a saber slashed down from the painter's head. The painter suddenly disappeared. Just like that, the two began to fight. Both sides could be said to be evenly matched. Below, Yi Xian looked up at the purple-robed elder in the starry sky. At this moment, the purple-robed elder was also looking at him. The purple-robed elder did not attack. All he had to do now was wait because they already had the upper hand. It was only a matter of time before the Moke clan and Never-Ending Star region were defeated. Yi Xian seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly looked at the distant Immortal. At this moment, Immortal was crazily slaughtering. Suddenly, Yi Xian said, "Immortal, help me. I'll kill that old bastard." After saying that, he transformed into a sword aura and soared into the sky. 1,000 feet away, Immortal, who was in the midst of a massacre, turned his head to look at Yi Xian's position. In the next moment, his body trembled, and he directly turned into a black shadow that chased after Yi Xian. His speed was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, he arrived beside Yi Xian. Yi Xian said, "Help me stop the others." Mo Xie did not speak. He only stared at the purple-robed elder in the starry sky. In the starry sky, seeing Yi Xian and Mo Xie rush over, the purple-robed elder's expression instantly changed. He knew how terrifying Yi Xian and Mo Xie were. Although they were both young, they were monstrous among monstrous geniuses. If the two of them worked together, killing a creation realm expert would be a very simple matter. The purple-robed elder hastily shouted, "Stop them! Stop them for me!" As soon as he finished speaking, countless strong people around dashed towards Yi Xian and Mo Xie. More than a dozen of them were killed by the two flying swords before they could even get close to Yi Xian and Mo Xie. When the rest of the people came into contact with Yi Xian and Mo Xie's speed suddenly exploded. He directly rushed into the crowd and punched forward with both fists. Rumble. In the starry sky, an explosion sounded like a clap of thunder. More than a dozen experts were crushed on the spot. Meanwhile, Yi Xian relied on the two flying swords to forcefully rush in front of the purple-robed elder. However, at this moment, the purple-robed elder's mouth suddenly curled up. His smile was a little strange. Sensing this scene, Yi Xian's expression changed greatly. At this moment, he could no longer hold back. He suddenly slashed down with his sword. The sword was the soul-suppressing sword. If this sword fell, at such a close distance, the purple-robed elder would definitely die. This was because the purple-robed elder was currently a soul body. Just as Yi Xian's sword was about to fall, a blurry shadow suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. In the next moment, Yi Xian felt an aura of death. However, Yi Xian's expression was incomparably calm. That sword still fell down. Meanwhile, the blurry shadow retreated dozens of feet because a demonic beast had appeared beside Yi Xian. Second floor Great God. At this moment, the purple-robed elder was dumbfounded. He didn't expect that the shadow would suddenly retreat. Even if he wanted to retreat now, it was too late. Yi Xian's sword slashed down. Chi! The purple-robed elder's soul instantly became illusory. Behind the purple-robed elder, Yi Xian coldly said, "I'll let you laugh." As his voice fell, he slashed back with his sword. The purple-robed elder's soul instantly began to dissipate. In front of Yi Xian, the shadow stared at the second-floor Great God behind Yi Xian. "I think you must be the mysterious expert behind Yi Xian. I've been waiting for you for a long time. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.